Welcome to What's in a Game. On today's show, are championships won in June? And if so, has Denver already won the 2026 NBA championship? We are grading Denver's offseason so far, but we're also going to ask the question, why did it take this damn long? But before all that, we'll get into the Jonas Valančiūnas news and break all of that down for you all, so stay tuned. Welcome back to What's in a Game. I'm Grace Jean here with my co-host, Will Jones. How are you doing today, Will, on this 4th of July Eve?
I was a little annoyed I was really happy with the Nuggets direction. Now I'm slightly annoyed with this Val news. We couldn't even do a pod just fully celebrating and happy about all these things like other
Well,
Nuggets.
we took too long. You and I had too busy of schedules to have done this a day early, or even like a couple hours earlier.
I know, yeah. But I'm glad to be able to get on after that's dropped just to talk through it with you and the fans. But yeah, it should be interesting because I know a lot of Nuggets media and creators and podcasters have been able to revel in a lot of these signings, and we'll do a little bit of that for sure. And I'm glad that a lot of the first initial reactions we had to just Cam Johnson in general ended up being pretty true in terms of how other people saw that trade. But just like hearing the news coming in live and reacting to it without having time to process it, I feel like we were pretty on the money.
Oh, I mean, yeah, like first impression of the trade hasn't really changed too much, but we'll kind of get more into the details because of course it's one thing to react when when you're kind of feeling the post-trade shock.
Mm-hmm.
And another to sort of dig more into the details and sort of, just be able to evaluate the all sides of things without the emotion of like, holy shit, this huge thing just happened that we were not expecting, right? But that's the fun of a very active free agency day. Before we jump into that news, just a couple programming notes. Gonna try to get a cap expert back on next week to talk about the specific avenues that are available to Denver now and kind of break down more of the details around the MPJ trade and what it opened up. Things like the luxury taxes, we've been getting a lot of questions about that and how everything works and understanding those incentives. I think we've done shows on this before, but when it came to Denver's situation, we didn't dive too deeply on what it meant to be a team that is below the first apron because Denver was well above it and was sort of scheduled to be well above it and only have certain tools available to them. We'll kind of touch on some of those things like we did on our live streamed on free agency day. But I want to be able to dig into those more deeply and talk about what it means to be a team in the bracket that Denver now finds themselves in, salary wise. Because it might inform some of the fans' favorite things to do in the trade machine, etc. Please do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe buttons. Really helps us out with the algorithm as we try to grow the channel. Still trying to hit our 1,000 sub goal. Will, we are at 989. When I made these
So
notes last night, we
close.
were at 980, but we gained another 9 subs today.
11
So
away.
we're 11 away. That's a big milestone for us. So looking forward to that. If you guys could help us out, we really appreciate it. Um, let's jump into the Valančiūnas news first. Valančiūnas dilemma. I love all your proper punctuation and everything there. Will using all the proper characters.
Judas
So,
Valančiūnas is going around in the chat.
oh my gosh, that's terrible. Oh gosh. Okay. So we're going to talk about the initial Valančiūnas reports and then kind of talk about the sort of branching option trees that come from that. Most of the time, if you've been watching the show for a while, I like to do really detailed show notes and have as many answers as I possibly can planned for you guys throughout, and kind of anticipate questions as well. so that we can, dive into any subject as thoroughly as possible. Obviously, this Valančiūnas news breaks right before we record. So we're going to be relying heavily on the chat to field the questions about this situation that we haven't thought of in a short time span. Okay, Will, so if you could please bring up the initial report about Valančiūnas here. So this is a report from Donatus Urbanus, who reports for what is the name of the site? Basket News. That's right. Basket News. Donatus says Valančiūnas is considering a stunning EuroLeague move and exiting the NBA. Per Basket News sources, Valančiūnas was lured by Panathinaikos, which is a Greek basketball club, with a multi-year offer from them. So before we dive into this, I should say that this report was edited. It was originally saying that Valančiūnas was nearing a move instead of considering, and I'm sure part of that was just like things getting lost in translation. But yeah, that was pretty stunning news, and there were a lot of questions that came to mind for me about what this meant. The first one was, does this impact the actual trade that Valančiūnas is in? Because the trade with Sacramento was not final. We didn't actually get to talk about this on our last show, but obviously the reason that this is relevant, if you haven't been following free agency at all, but you only watch our show, on day 2 of free agency, the Nuggets traded Dario for Jonas Valančiūnas straight up from the Sacramento Kings. And that was done because the Kings were trying to shed salary. Dario makes less than Jonas. Sacramento needed to, I believe, get under the first apron because they were trying to complete a sign and trade for Dennis Schroeder. So the reason I was concerned about this, like my initial concern was, does this impact the trade? Like, is Dario back? Like, we can't even move if we don't know that, right? Since this initial report, there has been further reporting by Jake Fisher, one of these rather prominent NBA insiders with lots of insider knowledge, that has basically said that from everything he's been told, Sacramento is not planning on reneging on this deal. You might ask why they would do that. Well, if Jonas was getting bought out potentially and willing to give some money back, it might be advantageous for them, but they do not. It doesn't seem like they want to, because they have a lot of different balls up in the air. One, they're trying to get this Dennis Schroeder sign and trade completed, and they need to be under the first apron to do that. They can't have Valančiūnas' money on the books. They probably don't want to have this situation lingering. The other thing that Sacramento has been linked to is a potential, probably a sign and trade or something, with the Warriors to try to sign Jonathan Kuminga in restricted free agency. I'm not saying that would happen, but that's something that they are apparently involved in trying to do. Sacramento is also in the process of potentially trying to sign Russell Westbrook. I think they've still been mentioned in those talks. If Malik Monk is involved in one of these other sign trades, so there's just a lot of things that Sacramento is trying to do, regardless of what you think of those things. And Sacramento is definitely in a race with the Pelicans for having a worst of all time offseason. Woat offseason. So grade those moves however you want, but they want to do them and they don't want to be locked in. So my initial concern was at least quelled. Do you have any questions or concerns about that aspect of it? And if not, Will, what's your sort of next concern about the situation with Jonas?
I mean, my biggest concern is just whether he's going to play for us.
Okay.
But I feel like we are in a very good position to still ensure that happens. There is the question that you shouldn't necessarily bend over backwards to offer him guarantees or some kind of weird extension if this is a leverage play, which people in the chat have brought up and are wondering. And I definitely kind of agree with But if all it takes is us just guaranteeing his second year, like I'm kind of down to do that if that's 2 years of him playing for us. But if he doesn't really want to be here, that's the biggest concern that I would have.
Well, the question, like, if it is a leverage play, he doesn't necessarily not want to be here, if that is the case,
Yes, that
right?
is good. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I just want him to play because I was so excited about him for the Nuggets, and we were all excited. And yeah, it would really suck if he just all of a sudden retired. I think people are wondering about that. If you want to talk about like the logistics of it, because he can't
Yeah.
just leave. He can't
Right.
just like
Okay.
retire.
So what is I don't want to talk about this in terms of worst case scenario, but what are the two sort of options? Either he stays or he goes, and then what are the different ways that that could look? Let's talk about what it would look like if Jonas wanted to leave. Uh, Jonas is not allowed to just retire from the NBA and go sign with another club overseas. There's this concept called I believe it's called a
Clearance
clearance
letter.
letter. That's right.
Yeah.
A clearance letter where if you sign with any professional basketball team, you basically have to, sign a statement that says you fulfilled all like outstanding contracts with other clubs, right? If they didn't get that, then that basketball club, in this case, it was Panathinaikos, I believe, is a Greek club that's interested reportedly in Jonas. Wouldn't be able to, um, he wouldn't be able to play in any like sanctioned competitions with them. So it feels like it's sort of an international treaty type thing where this is just like a thing. So he couldn't just retire. That's not an option. If Jonas wanted to leave badly, wanted to leave Denver to go overseas, he would need to be bought out. And uh, Keith Smith from Spot Track actually shared a story that he did on a similar situation last year. Is it last year? Yeah. Like 23-24 season with Sasha Vezenkov, who had come from overseas to play with the Kings. And then in his second year of his contract, wanted to go back to Europe, uh, but obviously was still under contract, and the Kings didn't want to buy him out. Eventually, they traded him to the Raptors, and he arranged a buyout with the Raptors, but the Raptors were not willing to take on any dead cap hit. So in going through with the buyout, Vazenkov basically forfeited the entirety of the rest of his contract with the Raptors, and they were like, "Okay, we'll buy you out, but we're not like we don't want any cap hits, so you have to take like the entire last year of your contract off." Because he had 3 years, he spent one in Sacramento. He wanted to leave in the second one. They didn't. They traded him at the trade deadline. And then at the end of that season, Sasha decided, "Okay, I'll forfeit the entire third year of my contract." Okay, so that's what he had to do. I'm not saying that if Jonas really wants to leave that badly, and, like, to be clear, the reason that Sasha would have done that is that he had money coming to him if he went back to, Olympiacos, which is another Greek club. Greece just really likes to, jump in and, these are prominent in clubs in the EuroLeague, so not, I don't actually have an agenda there. It's just kind of funny. Um so, okay, he would not be able to just leave. Denver would have to agree to a buyout, and probably the scenario that they would agree to one, if it is, like, that dire that, like, he absolutely doesn't wanna be here and, like, 100% wants to go back to Europe, uh, the situation that they would agree to a buyout in that case is if he forfeited almost the entirety of his contract with Denver, or the $10 million that he's owed this season, right? Okay. Any questions about that and, like, what it looks like if Jonas were to leave in those circumstances?
I read that article about Pazenkov and that whole situation. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. I wasn't really familiar with him before, but um, yeah, like I was saying, I feel comfortable with the position that Denver is in because the trade's gonna go through. People are reporting that, which is good because then we're off Dario.
Yes.
Um, it's just a matter of what is Val want
So
to
we don't have to
do.
deal with the messiness of, like, the Dario trade gets rescinded, and now
Yeah.
we lose a roster spot, and we have to deal with his money on the books. That's not the case,
Now
right?
it's just a matter of what he wants to do. I get that he got it. Whatever. There's an offer on the table for him in Europe that is interesting for him, obviously, as a player, but you are under contract. Can't just walk away. So you need the buyout. I don't see why Denver would do that unless they are talking and are trying to figure out what this next year of his contract looks like, what his vision is, or like what the new front office's vision is for him, and if he'll find that attractive or not. But I do find it funny that, these new GMs with John and Ben had done all these amazing moves and they make this trade. How often does this happen where you kind of make the trade and then the player throws a little bit of a fuss about it? Because I'm sure they weren't like in contact with Val's agent necessarily to be like, how interested would he be backing up Jokic? I mean, I don't know. I almost feel bad for them because it's like this is not a typical situation. They're already dealing with it, so can't wait to see how it plays out. But either way, if he doesn't come back, well, I mean, I don't know. It's just like we're not buying him out, so what the hell? It's just like it's so ridiculous.
Well, okay. I don't think it's super typical. Like this exact situation is not super typical, but players kick up stinks about trades
Yeah.
all the time. We just talked about I forget if we mentioned this on the show, but Drew Holiday gets traded to Portland and immediately there are reports coming out that he's really pissed that Boston traded him to Portland and he doesn't want to be there. And Portland is currently, we've had subsequent reports that Portland is currently in the process of trying to lobby Drew to want to stay there. Like, this is, at the end of the day, this is still a players' league. And it's not to say that Drew, like wouldn't play or whatever. But despite having him under contract for the next few years, Portland like feels the need to like look like we want you here. Like they have to like kind of sweet talk him and try to cajole him basically into like wanting to be there because this is a league where you want to keep your players happy effectively. I'm not saying that that would mean that Denver buys Jonas out for any substantial cap hit because if they did buy him out, whatever they bought him out for would count against their cap. So that's why they would probably want him to forfeit most, if not all, of the money owed to him
Hmm.
on this last year of his deal. He actually has 2 years on his contract this upcoming season and the year after, but the second year is non-guaranteed. So technically, you know, if this year didn't go well, come next summer, Denver could just waive him and then not have to worry about that. It's effectively like a team option on that second year, almost,
Yeah.
right?
But just real quick, because the chat is
Yeah.
wondering about the money specifics, I don't see them buying him out and having dead money. So if he
hmm
did forfeit the contract or the money on his contract and then just retired, forfeited the contract, I don't even, can you just do that and just be like, I don't want any of the
No,
money?
so both sides would have to agree to that being the case.
But if that,
So,
let's say they do both agree,
okay.
they can just not give him that money. Then where does that leave the Nuggets in terms of like an open spot? How much
Okay, so
money
you'd
can they
have
give
the open
out?
roster spot. They would have the full mid-level exception available to them, so $14.1 million dollars, and you could use that both in free agency, which is not, great right now because most of the good free agents are taken in the first, at least this week, first few days. Usually it's the first day. But since the new CBA rule also allows you to trade guys into those exceptions, and that was what Denver was gonna do almost if they hadn't. They are still planning on looping this Dario for Val trade in as like a 3-team deal with the Nets, so that
We didn't
you
trigger
know
an apron.
basically, so you
Yeah.
don't trigger an apron.
Hmm.
This trigger warning. That's what we should call the various things that trigger like first and second apron like hard caps trigger warnings. Um so yeah, I think that Val like just as like my opinion, I think that he's going to end up staying. You see in the case of Vazenkov with Sacramento, he was still he was still playing with Sacramento. He was racking up DNPs sometimes, but it's not like it was an every night thing. Plus Val is gonna be a better player for us than Vezenkov was, if only because he's our only backup center, and Sacramento had lots of different wings that they could play in front of Vezenkov that if they wanted to just not
Hmm.
deal with that and DNP him, then sure. The other thing, and I was just listening to the DNVR podcast about this, and I'd heard this stuff too, but Val is known as like a really like consummate professional locker room guy kind of thing. So kind of like Drew Holiday, I expect him to play if like that's the situation that they're in. And maybe like if it becomes this untenable thing, maybe they work out something at like the trade deadline. If like again, there are two different motivations that could be at play here from the Jonas side. It could be a leverage play, in which case he's probably going to play anyway and then try to just, contribute as best he can so that he can get that second year guaranteed
Yeah.
anyway on his contract.
I mean, I'd be
Or he
willing.
actually is like tired of the US and is like, the Kings ruined basketball for me. I don't want to go to Denver. I want to leave. And if you get to that point, then you could let him go at the trade deadline, and then you could figure out kind of a similar situation that they're in right now, where they would have more, not technical cap space, but more money available within those exceptions that they are eligible for, that they could trade a player into at the deadline, even if they can't sign a free agent. They could also use it to sign like a buyout guy too, and you could like be the best buyout destination at the deadline. Now we'll talk about some of like what the ideal rest of the sort of off season could look like for me. But when you get to uh the trade deadline and like the buyout market, there's usually not a ton of money offered to those guys by their new team because they're like bumping up against aprons and whatnot. If they hadn't been, they would have just like figured out a trade for them so that they wouldn't have to be bought out, right? Um, but if Denver did go, like, I'm not advocating for this, but one option is to, like I said, let Val just kind of play and get to the deadline. If it's still like he hates it here and wants to leave, figure out a buyout, and then you have more money available to you on the buyout market, then probably most teams are willing to offer buyout candidates, and there are going to be some good ones, potential buyout candidates this year. So we will see.
Yeah. So, question: the max they can use is 14 mil, or is there separate money they can use to sign? Well, vet mins you can just sign, and the
Veteran minimums you can just sign.
MLE is close to 14 mil.
The MLE, you with the Val money off, I think they would have access to the
The
full
full
14 mil. The other option again is to use the traded player exception generated from the trade
the Nets
to
trade.
trade somebody into it. The thing is Denver doesn't have a lot of assets to send out in a trade, which is why it's kind of sucks that you'd be
Yeah, because that player's just now gone.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, and it's like you wouldn't necessarily. You could look to still flip him to some other team, but then that team have to agree to buying him out. So I don't know. I get that there's other teams who might do that, but then do you want a player from that team? That's a complicated thing that probably won't happen.
Right.
Um,
You'd have to do sort of what I've advocated for, like going into the off season before I knew what they were, you know, what they were planning, which is try to identify like decent players on teams that are just trying to shed salary, and then trade them into your exception. Trade those players into your exception. But there are some free agents that we'll talk about that could take up that space if they wanted to deal with it this off season and just like fill that big man gap in other ways. Um, like I mean, honestly, when I first heard about this deal, my reaction, I got a lot of shit because I tweeted like overall positive, but mixed reaction, but overall positive deal because obviously, got rid of Dario and then hi Tess. Uh got rid of Dario and got a useful player in exchange, which is great, right? But my first thought was like, oh, I guess this means we're not going after Al Horford anymore, or he's not interested in us, and we're just
yeah,
like moving on with another big option.
chat is really saying that Horford to the Warriors is almost done. A lot of that in the chat, and a lot of
Oh, interesting. So the reason the Warrior stuff hasn't gone through is that they can't offer him a contract till Kuminga gets moved. I've seen other reports that Al is still deciding between Warriors, Lakers, and retirement. And he's not gonna decide even by this weekend, which is, like, interesting. I think that's just, like, a long time to, it's free agency's happening, I get, like, having like, making your personal decisions and all of
Mm.
that, especially if you're contemplating retirement, but,
Well,
things are moving.
Travis has this question about like a lawsuit against this other team. Like I said, in EuroLeague, you need to have that
Yeah, they're
clear
not going to
letter.
they're not going to sign him if we don't agree to a
Yeah.
buyout
No
because
Euro team can sign a player if they have other obligations. They have to like prove that they have none. And so that this has to be figured out before he can make some decision on the Euro League. And similarly, like the Nuggets do, like you tweeted this out, Grace, that we need to figure this out quickly because if we are going to pivot to signing other dudes, we need to do it before those people agree to go to other teams.
and we're kind of at that point already in the off
I
season.
know
So I
it's
think
getting
the
close.
best possible outcome is to just convince him to stay for at least most of the season, like through the deadline, and then kind of reevaluate then.
Hmm. Yeah. People are saying, let's see, people have some different reports. Like Mark Stein said, Nuggets continue to lobby Valančiūnas to
Yeah.
stay in the NBA rather than push for a buyout. Yeah, I mean that just makes sense for the Nuggets. Um,
Yeah, and it maybe makes sense for Val too if this is a leverage place that like, okay, I saw one option that someone put out there that's like we don't have to fully guarantee the second year because we can maintain some flexibility by saying we'll partially guarantee year two so that even if we wanted to waive him at the end of next year, he's guaranteed some money coming to him. Like let's just say there's something like cursed about being a backup big in Denver and then he had just like the worst season of all time. There's still, like, money guaranteed coming to him next season as well, like, the year after this one upcoming. Uh,
do
so
you
that's an
know
option too.
when the Euro League is? Like, how does the timing work with that? I don't really know. We did have a question about
I
that.
know they break for like, Eurobasket's coming up, so they're not gonna be playing through the summer. Apparently, it won't affect his move to Denver. No, that's right, like, the trade is still going through with Sacramento, so that is like Sacramento's not going to renege on this according to all reports. Like obviously that could change. It's the other thing we didn't mention is that this trade is not final. No trades could be final until July 6th. Um so we got 3 days until this is made final, but there's all reporting is that that part is not going to change. Um Looking at the EuroLeague schedule now, maybe they break for things like
It
Eurobasket.
says late September, red and white
Late September is
says.
when they start. Okay,
So
so, I
right
mean, a month
before the
before the
NBA.
NBA. Alright.
So we have to kind of this has to be figured out, yeah, in this summer, I think. Yeah, the backup center curse for the Nuggets is still we thought we were clear of it, and here it is again, striking once again. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know much about Val. I like him as like I'm glad to hear that he's a great locker room guy. The court, like his play on the court, I was excited for a backup. He was backing up Sabonis in Sacramento. I don't know if it's hard for him to
His
stomach being.
Lithuanian buddy?
Yeah, I don't know if it's hard for him to stomach being a backup, and he's like, hey, like I can go be a starter in EuroLeague, and maybe my NBA days are over. But I don't really know where he's at. I think we can convince him.
We should just offer him a starting job. Jokic would come off the bench for the team, right?
Jokic would love coming off the bench.
We'd fix the bench problems probably.
uh, yeah, this is quite an interesting dilemma. Yeah, thank you,
Jokic is our
chat.
6th man. Oh my god, Jokic for 6th man of the year.
Yeah, appreciate you guys giving us what info you're hearing and your questions for sure about this as we talk through it. I do think he's going to stay in Denver and play, though. I think like there's too many obstacles to get through for him to just clear out of the league and go right to EuroLeague. I don't know what he wants, but at least now he's getting Denver's attention to possibly voice his concerns and what he wants. And I do think Denver's a great situation. He has the chance to win a title. We haven't got
Yep,
into it, but like
I know.
we're one of the best teams in the league once again. I can't wait to talk about the other moves as well. But yeah, I wanted to go to this comment before we get too deep in the show. Off topic, but have you guys seen the Hollinger article calling the Nuggets moves penny pinchers? It's funny because the same dude also said that the Monte Will trade for KCP was a money move and a salary dump, and then he later was like, "That was one of my worst takes."
That's funny.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. Of course, he's doing it again. It's so weird. This is
Like,
clearly not
sometimes
a.
people get stuck in their frameworks. It's like me and point guards, you know?
Yeah, I can't believe he's
It's
doing it again. Anyway, what else are people
yeah.
saying? Why would you not want to play in Denver? Completely agree. I think it'd be a
I don't
great
know, ask
situation for
everybody.
him. Yeah, we get the full Emily back for sure. So look, like I don't think the Nuggets are totally screwed if there is some worst case scenario, just because they're not going to let themselves get into a worst case scenario with the dead money. So yeah, because it's like you just saw what the front office was doing. They're not gonna. This is not a team to be having dead money when Jokic has already been putting the pressure on them, and they've just made these moves. That to me was showing that they were taking Jokic's comments really seriously. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anything else you
no,
want to say
totally
about it?
important. Just I think what's gonna end up happening is that he will play with Denver for at least part of the season, if not the entire season, and be professional and, like, be fine. Maybe Denver does end up giving into a leverage play and at least partially guaranteeing that second year. Maybe they don't. I think this is an interesting test for Tenzer and Wallace. I also think that what I just said about him staying is the best option in front of Denver because while they will open up, like I said, the ability to sign other guys, and they already have like room to do that. By the way, like we were going to be talking about what additional moves we want Denver to make that still maintains flexibility, even with Val just kind of on the roster set and all that. But they'd have even more of that to an extent. But I think that the best thing
Hmm.
going forward for from Denver's perspective would be to convince him to stay.
Yeah,
Uh,
Vincent's just saying maybe Al Horford's waiting to see how much money he can get if the once the Kaminga thing's resolved, just because he
hmm,
may be wanting more. What's the max we can give Horford? Just the full MLE, right?
yeah, $14.1 million. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the max. If we couldn't get Val without right now, actually, I think Denver would have like almost 8 million. I need to redo the math because Spot Track's not updated with with like math wise yet because the deals aren't all final. But I think we have something like around 8 million of space between where we are at and the first apron that we could offer somebody, but there's nobody kind of on the market that I would give that kind of money to.
Right.
Um,
Well, that's good though, because like if you need
yeah,
a, you may not be getting someone as good as JV, but I don't know. Or you mean that's with JV? We,
that's with JV.
yeah, yeah.
I need to redo the math, so don't quote me on that. But when I was, quickly kind of tabulating things in my head yesterday, that's around where we were at.
Wait, do comment. We have the taxpayers mid level.
So the taxpayer mid-level, so we have access to part of the full mid-level, and we have more than that available. The way that it works is you don't get to use both the full mid-level and the taxpayer mid-level in the same season.
Yeah.
So and the reason for that is so the full mid-level exception is $14.1 million or up to it. The taxpayer mid-level, I think this year is like that commenter said 5.8 million. But you can't use any part of the full mid-level exception and cross the first apron. So, like, that's a rule. So if you use the
Swipe. Welcome
thanks,
in.
Swipa. Uh, if you use any part of the full mid-level exception, you can't use the taxpayer mid-level exception in that season, and you can't cross the first apron in that season either. You become hard capped. We'll talk about this stuff next week when I get
Hmm.
our get our cap expert on the show. But okay, let's actually jump into the brighter side of the show here, where we're grading Denver's offseason moves so far. Will, did you want to just talk about these, or did you want to do like a little chart?
No, I got a chart.
Oh, perfect.
I'm ready to go.
All
I
right.
think
So,
we're still gonna. Well, I guess we can talk about how we're gonna grade the Valančiūnas move, considering the recent uh, breaking news. So yeah,
yeah.
let's get into it.
All right. So let's talk. Obviously, the big one is MPJ for Cam Johnson. I'm giving this one a B plus. I could have been generous and said A. I think it's a very good move. But I'm gonna go with a B plus. Uh, and I'll tell you why it's not like fully an A. They did trade their most valuable future pick asset, and the trade did not include a salary dump of Zeke Naji, which I believe would have been incredibly valuable to us in not just opening up a roster spot, but moving off of what is looking to be dead money for years to come. But obviously it's a very good move. They opened up a lot of salary and exceptions without a substantial downgrade in how the starters operate or in their flexibility. We talked so much um with Jake Coyne about various moves that included moving MPJ to kind of break up his contract, quote unquote, right? And a lot of those, Denver is like taking a substantial hit to some aspect of the quality of their play, or having to change how they play substantially, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But this move is like you basically stay at least the same, as good a same team, but then you open up flexibility to add to what you have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other reason it's not like this would have been just like an A plus if I weren't so concerned about Cam's durability. So it's less about health because obviously MPJ has the back injury and surgery history, and something could happen at any time and blah blah blah. But the reality of where these players have been over the last 3 years of their careers is that MPJ's played over 200 games and Cam, I think, has barely broken 150. Um, so I am concerned about that. But again, because you get to address the depth issues, you don't have to worry so much about the durability of every single member of your top five. So, um, really good trade. Love these highlights that we'll include it in here of
Look,
the offensive
look at him going at
versatility that
Jokic
Cam
right there.
has. I know, right? Got a bump, created the space, and
Oh,
just kept
shooting
it
over
moving.
Mike too. I didn't even know that was going to be in there. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna give the trade an A plus because everything that the Nuggets are doing right now is flowing from this trade.
Yeah.
And even though Val is now on the fence or whatever, like we were able to break up MPJ's contract into these pieces that everyone's so excited about right now. And when we were talking about these kinds of trades before it actually happened, it was sad to think about. And I was sad hearing it. And I think I was a little more tame in my reaction just because, MPJ is a beloved nugget. Like, I get it. And I do get the concerns with Cam, but I think Cam just is an upgrade to MPJ straight up. And that allowed us to add three people who can play, which then puts Strother and Piwat and such down on the pecking order, which is where they should be. And that just makes the Nuggets a contender again. And I feel very confident about our regular season. I'm excited to watch that. I think we're going to be amazing. I just listened to Locked On and heard all the possible lineups. Like my brain was almost breaking thinking of all the different combinations. It's kind of like I feel almost worried for David Adelman because it's like you have so many options now. Don't screw it up. Like let's find the best options as quickly as possible. But it's a better problem to have than only being able to play the starting five as we're used to. So although I get all the fans' concerns and everything you just said about Cam, I'm like fully on board now. I could be wrong, obviously, but just because of what followed from it, I'm giving it an A plus. But maybe in a vacuum, I wouldn't be like because you give up the first round pick. And I still think Cam's an upgrade. And his dribbling is what is really selling me. Like his
Yeah.
handle just looks so much more solid than MPJ. And I said
Oh,
on the
yeah.
last show that while we'd been frustrated about MPJ, not necessarily his own fault, but wondering why we can't involve him more and put him into actions and run things through him. Cam can just do that. I think people are going to be surprised by how much he can do that, and they're going to really love it. He may not be the like dribble creator playmaker you were advocating for to put alongside Jokic and Murray, but I still think he can do some of that and more than MPJ. So that's exciting for me.
For the wing for that small forward position, I think that it's really good. I still think that they need a little bit more of it from other positions, but I think that's definitely an upgrade in that regard for Denver. And that's the kind of thing that could persuade me to bump it up to like an A minus. And this is one of those things where if I look at the trade in retrospect, that's what I would do. But I still have the durability concerns, and I think that's enough. Plus we still have Zeke Nashi on our books thing, but can't expect Ben Wallace to fix everything.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the next move. So we talked about this trade. They traded Dario Saric for Jonas Valančiūnas straight up. I'm giving this one an incomplete for now. I had this as an A plus before because there was literally nothing bad about it. They traded a non-factor in Dario that was an expiring contract for a player at a position of need in Jonas, backup center. The potential buyout situation obviously changes that because it means like, okay, this is like a big gaping hole in our offseason now. But I will say the floor for this deal is like a B because at worst, they've probably just just dumped Dario's deal that was otherwise going to be a negative asset for us over to Sacramento, unless they ended up just paying the entirety of Jonas's buyout, in which case it's like, well, that's bad because we could have just bought out Dario for less. But I don't think that's what's going to end up happening, even if we do end up buying Jonas out.
So you
So
want me to give this an incomplete?
Yes.
Grace.
What?
No, it's funny. I'm gonna give this a B plus. Just because you are still getting off Dario, the trade is gonna go through. That's gonna open up a roster spot. Like even if something happens where something crazy where Jonas gave up all the money and went to Euro, never played a minute in Denver, there's a spot open that's going to be someone. It may not be the best backup center because the market is rough and I don't know who they sign, but there's other options out there. We still have been wondering about point guard and all that. I'm assuming they're going to get some backup center that may not be as good as JV, but I still think he's going to play in Denver. I would have given this an A plus if this news didn't come out. I'm going to be a B plus just because I don't know where Val's head is at. But I mean, the Kings fans must be. I mean, they get Dennis, but still, that trade, this Dario Valančiūnas trade, is such a fleecing by the Nuggets in some senses. Just an amazing trade. I can't believe it happened. Just something I never envisioned that we could just move Dario and to get a player back like Val. And I'm really glad that we took advantage of the Kings business and got in on this trade. So I love it. I'm excited about it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the minimum signings. First one being Bruce Brown going on a vet minimum. This one is an absolute A plus for me. They got a vet who wants to be in Denver, knows the system, and is at least theoretically and has been on this team in the past a two-way player within our system. They didn't use the taxpayer mid-level exception on him, which they're not going to. They didn't use the full mid-level exception on him. I was very happy to see that. And no player option for a player that is still in his prime. I think Bruce is still only 20. Is he 27 or 29 now? One of those. I feel like all our players are 29. 28. He's in between. In between those ages right now. So that's just like a good good bit of business. I was told that you had to give player options to everybody because nobody wants to come to Denver, and obviously Bruce does want to come to Denver, but as we'll talk about in the next one as well, I just think that this front office has done a good job of, like, drawing the line somewhere and just being like, "Do you wanna play here or not?" You know? Like, "You get to play with Jokic, let's move on."
Yeah. I totally see Bruce being an A plus, but because well, at first I feel like our grades were really similar. That changed with this JV news, and I just gave this an A because I wanted
You
to be
want it to be
different.
different.
Um,
Yeah.
but I love Bruce for the vibes. I guess I left off the plus because I still don't quite know what to expect from Bruce on the court. Just because that was 3 years ago he was on our team, but I'm still very positive that Bruce is going to be a good player for us. And I mean, I pulled these Pelicans highlights just to show that he's still got, the downhill game. He's got rim finishing. Obviously, I'm still high on his ability, or at least higher than some of our backups off the bench to shoot the three, though I don't think his percentage is going to be very high, but he's going to be, if Russ doesn't come back, a good Russ replacement. The fans are going to love it. Jokic is going to love it. So I'm excited for Bruce. We'll see. We'll see how he plays. I'm not fully sure yet, but hopefully he'll fit right back in and look like the $22 million Bruce versus the Pelicans and Toronto Raptors Bruce, which it wasn't even that really bad. He didn't play a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just the vibes boost too. Like, getting him back and he so clearly wanted to be here. So it's one of those, like, I could give it an A, but also it seems like anybody could have done it with how much he wanted to be here at the same time.
Oh gosh. Zamora asked this question about Nuggets making a run for Luka.
We can talk
That's
about
a
that
big
briefly when
one.
we get to the coaching news, but I don't think they are. Long story short.
It is a big one.
Um, all right, so Tim Hardaway Jr. on the vet minimum. Basically all the same things. I give this one an A, not an A plus. Um, my note here is so it is possible to get a decent player to come to Denver without giving them a player option. The reason it's A and not an A plus is that he very likely, like, it's a very likely possibility that Tim Hardaway Jr. cannot be a guy that stays on the floor in the playoffs, like, at all. But in the regular season, he's going to give you a function of need, which is shooting off the bench, some bench scoring. He's a good transition player too. I don't know if you've seen him in transition. He's a speedy dude, very athletic, and is at least a regular season innings eater. So
hmm
I like the move.
I do like the move too, but I gave it a B just to. I know he's a little unreliable and streaky at times. He's definitely didn't live up to the excitement that he had, back in the earlier days of the Mavs, when he was there with Luka. But he did have some good nights with Detroit. We did need 3-point shooting, and there were some names we were throwing around about how to address that maybe would have been better if we got them, which is why I'm giving it a B. But I still
For
like him.
example,
Well, like maybe not in this position on a minimum, but
no, but like who are
even
you
like
thinking of?
who are we talking about? Like I think Grayson Allen would have been good, like you were saying. I think who are
That's
the
way more than a minimum. That's like
That's what I'm
4
saying.
years and $15
But I'm
million
like, you're getting
for yeah.
THJ to address 3-point shooting, which I think is very important. I'm more confident THJ will make a three versus like P-Want, for example. So I like that. But it's not like he's going to solve all the problems. But he's another guy, and it's a minimum. So that's why it's a great
Right.
signing. So I still like it, but I'm just like, you can't just sign THJ and be like, all the 3-point shooting solved. But we'll see. Like, again, he's a backup. It's a minimum, still a good signing. I like that like you said, someone came to Denver without needing a player option or extra convincing, though now we're seeing maybe someone else who doesn't want to come to Denver. But yeah, No, I like it. It's just I could see this like going kind of south and him not playing very well, and Nuggets fans kind of being like, "This dude sucks. Like, just play P. Watt more, play whoever more." And hoping that doesn't happen, but that's why I'm giving it a B, just because I'm a little bit uncertain of how it's going to
Yeah,
turn out.
this is like I get that. I get being a little bit more skeptical of it because I think of all the players on the roster who might be playing over the young guys, Tim Hardaway Jr. is the one that could engender that exact reaction.
Hmm.
Just because I got this question about his defense and like, look, when he's has these like scoring outbursts, like he could have like 5-10 game stretches. This is according to Mavs fans where he's giving you 25 plus a night in like 20, 25 minutes a night, 20, 25 plus points, in that time span. Which is great. But when he's not scoring, like it could be really, really bad. Like I actually disagree with this, Noah. I don't think THJ is a better defender than Julian. I think that he can be just as airheaded off ball and is just worse around screens. The thing that he would be better with, uh, better at than Julian is he's got a much stronger base, and so he could guard like bigger wings and things like that. It's just like in the regular season when you're just kind of going through the motions of games, I don't know how often we're going to be like intentional about trying to get him on those matchups. Um, so it's gonna look pretty bad. Like I don't think that I think they're gonna look similar defensively. Like people will be shocked at how similar the defensive impact of Tim Hardaway Jr. is compared to Julian Strother. So when he's not scoring, it's gonna look kind of the same as that. Um, so that's fair.
Yeah, I do think there is something to him being a little more experienced and not necessarily like getting lost on coverages or looking just totally. Yeah, because like Julian might lose a play because he just doesn't know where to be. I think Hardaway is more. He's a vet, so you'd think he'd be in better positions. We'll see. I bet he'd be in better positions, but he may like just lose a guy because of just where he's at in his career and his athleticism. But like the fact that well, it's okay. Like he kind of reminds me of like with the Thunder, for example, the fact that they have the depth, they have more guys who can go off on night to night basis off the bench that you may not expect. I'm not saying THJ is going to be the guy who's going to win us some big game and everyone else is going to suck, but it's just more chances that he might hit like 3 of 3 from 3 on a random night, and you're like, damn, that's amazing. Because there are players like that when teams are deep, you have more chances of a guy doing something like that. And um, on the whole, with these moves, I remember you talking about how GMs just need to do their job competent enough to put us in position to then compete once you get there. And while I love all these moves and I'm excited about the Nuggets and our chances to win the title, I definitely feel like we're putting ourselves in the best position considering where we were to now compete. And we'll just see what happens when we get there. Like you need a lot of luck, you need matchup luck, you need injury luck and health luck. I feel like we're maximizing our chances to be lucky. And so I'm excited about all these guys.
I like that. I like the way you phrase that. We're maximizing our chances to be lucky, to be
Yeah.
able to what's that phrase that fortune favors the prepared,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Or you make your own luck kind of thing. Like,
Or that too. Yeah.
yeah. And I feel like that's what a lot of champions do because they have the right squad. They're more matchup proof. They have good injury luck because there's more people. They're playing in
I don't
positions
know.
that
I,
they're
I,
more
I don't I don't know that it had like I don't know that that last part's true
well.
necessarily,
Yeah,
like an aggregate.
because you can just get unlucky. Like even if you have depth, you
Yeah.
can get unlucky and have an injury.
Like
But
if you have an injury to the wrong player, like it doesn't
then
matter
it
how many
doesn't
people
matter.
you have. Yeah.
But I guess it's hard to know. You can't really prove it. But it's like if you're not riding at one of those players who would really screw you if they got hurt a lot because you're like spreading the minutes out by playing other lineups, maybe that will limits. Although the NBA would argue that playing time in games does not affect your chances of being injured. But of course they would say that, and so
Yeah, it's like, was this written by the NBA?
yeah,
Like,
but that's always their go-to line when anyone talks about shortening the season. But anyway,
yeah,
so yeah,
perfect.
these are the grades. I like it.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about what we've sort of learned about Ben Wallace, Ben Tenzer, and John Wallace from just these moves, and there's so much more to come. Before we even got this Jonas news, there's still things that I think need to be done in terms of finishing touches for the roster and things like that. But we can start to, you know, like discuss like what does this mean for like what the how we describe the general approach of this front office. The first thing that comes to mind really for me was that they're staying tighter on the margins, and the first indication of that, if anybody was live on stream with us on the first day of free agency, was drawing a line on player options, right? Even on these vet minimum contracts. Um, and then, before obviously we get the Jonas news, this was just like a straight up taking advantage of Sacramento in a vulnerable position because they needed to shed a salary that was larger than the one we were giving up with Dario. So they gave up this good player for nothing, basically. Um, but still watching to see how they handle things like Christian's extension. We still don't know things like how would these guys handle the NBA draft if they had a pick, because you can have a good like asset management GM that like handles trades and all that really well, but maybe they're like the worst at picking prospects in the draft situation too, which isn't necessarily bad. No, not no GM, but a lot of GMs are not good at everything, even good overall GMs. So that'll be something interesting to watch for next year as well. Well, I wanted to know what you thought of when you saw the totality of these moves. And right now Denver is sitting in a position where they have 14 out of 15 roster spots filled. They might do something else. They might trade to open up other roster spots. They might fill that last one. They might not, because they don't have to. You can roll into the season with just 14 filled. But did you feel like there was any like coherent roster building philosophy in terms of like player archetypes, like what they were looking for in players with these signings?
I feel like if anything, it was a little bit more hinging on the side of well, this might be weird to say with Cam Johnson, but a little more like reliable, a little
Mm,
more well-roundedness, getting
mm.
away from the specialist role
Well,
where it's
Tim
like,
Hardaway Jr. is kind of like
yeah,
that at this point.
yeah, and I get,
Although it's not like it's shooting isn't the only thing he does. I think he does have like some scoring bag as well, but I just mean like he's not really a two-way player at this point in his
well, I mean,
career.
it's hard to link like Cam Johnson, Tim Hardaway, and Valančiūnas, um, and Bruce all like together as one archetype, because I do think each fit a specific need for the
Yeah.
Nuggets. Like they clearly looked at the roster, saw that it was too young, so you get some vets. If they were on another team that had a ton of vets, maybe they would have gotten some more younger guys. Like I think they're just trying to adjust the specific roster. Um, Backup center is obviously a big question. We can't have DJ forever, can't have Dario, so they solved that problem. Um, we knew depth was a little bit of a concern. A lot of lineups that were unsustainable, so they're going to fix that too. But I do think like Cam is a little more well-rounded than Mike. He can he may be a little worse in some areas, like rebounding, for example, but the shots there, I like the dribbling, I like the passing, um, I like his ability to, yeah, just like his off the floor game, and JV's an upgrade over any backup we've had.
I mean,
Um,
certainly over the one we traded. Yeah.
and then Bruce, I kind of feel like they had no choice with Bruce because he's a vet minimum, and so it's like you're gonna say no to that. I don't think so.
Yeah, just like a guy who can play
Yeah, and then
on a vet
but then when
minimum.
you get down to like the 9 and 10th guy in a roster like Tim Hardaway, and it's like, yeah, he's a 3-point guy, and if even if that is his one thing he can do, that's okay. But
Because it's your ninth guy instead of
yeah,
your seventh guy.
yeah. So I don't know that
Yeah.
there's like an archetype that I saw, but I just like that it showed that they kind of understood what the Nuggets' problems were.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I feel like the approach has been more opportunistic than like deliberate. Like we're trying to get this kind of player here. That's not necessarily a bad thing, especially with the position that Denver is in where they're um like looking to hit on the margins. it's kind of like a beggars can't be choosers situation where you're trying to get out of a certain position with your, the structure of your cap sheet, and also just like get enough playable dudes in the door. Um, so I don't think that we're gonna know what like unifying traits, especially John Wallace, because he does seem to be the one that's taking over like the player side, like, eventually. Obviously, Ben is having input too. These guys are effectively co-general managers at this point, right? We don't know what they're looking for in players, like, what it would look like if we asked John, like, "What would you do if you could build a team around Jokic from scratch?" Like, we won't know that, um, for at least a while, and maybe we never will, but it seems like they're going about the job with less of, sort of being precious about, like, the kinds of players that they want, and more like, "This should work. We can make this work," kind of thing, as long as it meets other requirements in terms of, like, our flexibility. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's why they brought in. Well, I look like this is so early on. I like these moves. We saw Booth do some good offseason moves too, and then we won the championship. So, but at this point right now, they have Ben for the business side, they're saying, and John for the player side. And so, like you're saying, they're like getting these players, but threading the needle from the roster and the financial outlook to try to maintain some flexibility. So I like what they've done. I do think like we're lucky that Bruce wants to come for that minimum. I don't think like they convinced him to do that necessarily. He would have signed no matter who that was. But yeah, you have a good point. Really quick though, the chat is going crazy because they are debating whether Marvin Bagley is better than Jonas
Oh my
Valančiūnas.
gosh, okay. Let's consult. Let's consult the Darko chart. I've been going kind of crazy with these. Oh, DeMontis is the default here. That's funny. All right, Jonas Valančiūnas. Marvin Bagley has had quite the resurgence over the last 2 seasons, I would say. He's actually on quite the upswing for the last, yeah, 2 full seasons. He's climbed up a lot in this particular impact metric, and this one actually has him by the end of last year, he was higher than Jonas at the end of last year, who's been on kind of a down spiral. But, I'd like to think that part of that is because he was playing on the Wizards and then the Kings. Jonas has been, like, pretty good and, like, a relatively stable force. He's kind of on the other side of the aging curve for a big, but like, it's not like a steep, downward slope, just kind of, like, meandering until this last season, basically. But even 23-24 was, like, a pretty good year for him. So, I would kind of bet on a bounce back, and again, like, the bar is literally hell when you're talking about just, like, a competent backup center that can, like, screen and rebound, in Denver. We'll see how it works out. Maybe it doesn't, and then Denver's like, "Actually, it's not worth it. We'll just buy you out at the trade deadline." We give up. Maybe John Wallace was right when he said, like, "Ugh, whatever, this just never works." And but I don't have any reason to just believe that that's gonna be the case because, like I said, he's not he's not washed. Yeah, the
Mm.
metrics take a dump on bad teams for sure. That's why it always jumps out to me when a player has good metrics on a bad team. I'm like, "Whoa, how did that happen?" Like, Cam Johnson had a career high offensive EPM in Brooklyn last year, for example, and that, like, really stood out to me. Defensively, it was bad, though. But again,
Hmm.
Brooklyn, so I'm willing to kinda let that, slide a
Yeah.
bit.
I know that CT had been saying like Bagley could be an option too if Valanciunas doesn't work out.
So I wouldn't mind that actually, and he would probably take a minimum. Like, he's probably looking to rehab his value. I don't know that playing Jokic's backup is the best way to rehab your value, but the plus to Bagley is that he would also be able to play the 4 next to Jokic, and our forward depth that we're gonna talk about, in our next segment is still a concern of mine with the way that the roster is as it stands. Even if we had Jonas on the roster, so having Bagley that could play kind of both positions would make me feel a little bit better about that. Um, but yeah, like Bagley is definitely still an option. It would kind of suck if another team swooped up and just took him before we were able to resolve this Jonas situation. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't mind that at all. All right, let's move on to the last thing I wanted to say on this, just in terms of what we're learning about these execs.
Yeah.
MPJ was not part of the core that they were talking about being invested in. Or he was a part of the core until he wasn't, right?
Yeah, I think that's more what it was.
Right. And I think it's just like nobody's safe, if that makes sense.
Hey, people wanted them to be more objective about the roster. Not that trading MPJ means that they were low on him, but yeah, I
They
think
were
that
low on him on that contract, which I get.
yeah. I mean, look what it's doing for us right now. It solves so many issues in some ways. Although I get that it's like the vision behind the trade seems a little less concrete to fans because the Valančiūnas thing is in flux right now, and that was more the selling point of it. But still, you have someone who I think is arguably better than MPJ on a cheaper contract. Like
Yeah.
everyone said, if we trade MPJ, that would be a loss. Like there's no way we win the trade. It's just you kind of get two worse players, but you basically eke out ahead, I think, and then you're adding more. Like that's incredible.
Right. And the way you do it is by trading not just your most valuable draft asset, but probably the most valuable draft asset that is like available to trade right now for any team. Because when you like the 2032 Denver Nuggets first round pick, like Jokic could easily be retired or completely washed by then and still on a supermax contract. Um, even washed Jokic on a supermax isn't going to tank your team. But if he is retired by 2032, which is more likely than even 2031, which is probably why the Nets wanted that pick, then that is easily like that could be the number one pick in that draft, right? And they're just like, we just traded Cam Johnson for potentially like they're still trying to make up for the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce trade where they gave the Celtics the picks that became Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
That was a big one.
So maybe that's what they were hoping that they, got from Denver. Little do they know, Denver doesn't tank. So even if Jokic is retired, they're probably going to be, I don't know, 16th in that draft or something with just whoever's on the roster.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy that they traded that pick. I've been advocating for doing that because I was like, I'll be bad for 5 years if it means, maximizing this roster now. And I get that that will suck when it comes, but I'll mentally prepare for it.
My issue with trading future picks isn't trading them. It's like making sure that you're getting the best value for them because they are really valuable and you want to make sure that you're doing the best thing with them.
Right.
All right, let's move on to segment 2, finishing touches here. What are the question marks and the holes still left in Denver's rotation? I'll talk about the forward depth first because I alluded to it just a couple minutes ago. I'm worried about our rebounding. MPJ is not like a great rebounder, but he was a good rebounder for his position. Now you're taking a downgrade with that with Cam, who's more like an average to slightly below average rebounder for his position. Although I don't know because my bar for that is like a 6'10" guy at small forward, and now we're going to the 6'8" guy at small forward who averages less than 5 rebounds a game. So we're in a situation where let's say we're going to get to my ideal rest of the off season, but let's say they figured out a way to move Zeke for something that isn't a forward. And if you move Zeke and rookie Deron Holmes is not immediately good, Denver's in a really rough spot with the backup like 3-4 position, 4-3 I should say, because the other wings on the team, with the exception of Bruce, really, they don't have that kind of like strength that required to fulfill like that particular function. It's less about like contending with like bigger bodies because we're talking about mostly bench guys anyway. But even like on my nights, like AG has to take off. Like who takes that spot? Do we play a ton more small ball like we basically did all of last season? I don't really love that. So I think that the forward depth is definitely an issue that I would like them to address, and we'll talk about like ways to do that in the next section. But if they don't do anything there, they kind of low-key need Zeke to be good. Otherwise, you're relying on a rookie, Deron Holmes, to be good, which maybe it has a higher probability of happening at this point in Zeke's career.
Oh man, yeah, the chat's also debating Zeke a lot, and the idea that he needs to be good. But yeah.
Just
So,
because of the situation that we're in with our forwards now.
but
That's
am
literally it.
excited for Deron Holmes. I know we haven't seen him, but I do think there's a chance he could be good at the 4. I felt almost better with it knowing that Valančiūnas would be there in the 5, so that he could play with a more traditional big. But you could also go small. I know with other potential options at the 5, although I want to limit the minutes that AG's doing that because I'm sick of him having to do that personally. Yeah, I mean, so if you have this forward depth issue, and I don't know when you want to talk about this, we did get a question about whether you see Cam playing the 4, which was also a funny debate I saw you having with Matt on Locked
With Matt
On.
on Locked On, just from the chat. Yeah, they'll probably try to play Cam at some small ball 4. My issue with that is, one, like, Cam's durability issues. I just don't wanna I wanna try to limit the situations where he's, like, more likely to be, I don't know, spraining an ankle or doing whatever. And also, I don't it's not about, again, him having to contend with, large 4s in backup units that I would say don't really exist, but a lot of the teams, especially in the West, have gotten huge even off their benches, so that's a thing. But really the rebounding and the defensive rebounding in particular is what concerns me. In that situation, like, you have to be able to board. And this team has gotten steadily worse at that over the last few years. And now, uh, exactly, I don't want Cam to get injured playing the 4. Or injured doing anything, but let's try to limit those opportunities. Zeke just has to be decent. Yes, Zamora, the floor is in hell. Like, let's see if he can cross that bar, you know? Um,
I would trade
would you
Zeke for
consider
anyone at
Zeke
this point.
for Kyle Anderson? Like, Kyle Anderson can play and he can handle the ball. Like, I mean,
Slow mo,
yeah.
more
Because then you could
vets.
play point slow-mo, and then you don't have to worry about, like, well, Zeke isn't really a spacer because, like, nobody respects his shot, but he can't handle the ball either, but slow-mo can. So, yeah, I would definitely trade Zeke for slow-mo, like, no question. I don't think you can straight up, though. I think slow-mo makes a little bit more, but now we can take back more money in trades than we send out, so that could be possible. Is he on the Heat still? Kyle Anderson, yeah, he makes 9.2 million. I would do that in a heartbeat,
Yeah,
but I don't know why Miami would.
no.
Um, okay. So forward depth. The other thing is the ball handling and Jalen Pickett. Will, you alluded to this a bit earlier. I think that Denver still needs a little bit more secondary creation. Uh, Maybe Jalen Pickett is that. It's not just the secondary creation, but just like point guard play.
Yeah, like you want
Um,
the more pure point guard play is what you're like referencing here.
I want one or the other
Okay.
at this point, like,
We
just because
need
I
a
think
little bit
we've
of
filled out.
more either way.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I don't know how good Jalen Pickett's going to be versus NBA competition in, like, a regular rotation role, and I guess nobody in the organization does because he hasn't been in that situation, so they're probably, if I had to guess, gonna roll into the season without addressing that particular need and just seeing, like, how much of it can Pickett give us and how much more do we need, like, how much do we need to invest in this? If it's not that much, then it's something that they could address potentially at the deadline. Um and then the last thing is the point of attack defense, which is funny because it's been a regular emphasis for Ben and John in all those interviews that they did about their roster priorities. But what is Peyton's role going to be in that too? I will say that, like, in 2023, Bruce at least had KCP next to him. Like, they had all these really good point of attack guys. And my question for you about, like, Peyton's role in all this, it actually has to do with, like, the guys next to him. Uh, like, where is in the regular season, where is Christian Brown gonna fall defensively on a scale of 1 to 5? Where 1 is 2024-25 Christian Brown that we just saw defensively in the regular season, or 23-24 KCP, which is borderline all defense. Like, he was like 2 he was 2 players out from making an all defense
1
team.
is what we just saw, and 5 is KCP.
5 is peak
Peak
defensive
KCP,
KCP we
like
saw last year.
3.5.
Okay. That's actually a lot of improvement.
Okay.
That's like improvement from even his rookie year
I don't know that I was
and his
trying to go
sophomore
for
year
a lot of
defensively.
improvement. I was trying to like hit somewhere in the middle, but on the side of being better than we're hoping.
Yeah.
But I at some level I just think CB's not gonna be that same type of defender as KCP. Like they're just different kind of archetypes. One point though about this was like I like our ability to use like Cam is more defensive. He has more
No.
defensive versatility than people think. You could
Sure.
throw him at
Sure,
some
he has
people.
defensive versatility, but he's not, like,
No, I'm not saying for
good at
this role.
it.
I'm not saying.
Sure.
I'm just saying we can throw him at people. We couldn't throw MPJ at people, which then could maybe free up some of these other people to defend in spots that they're like more
Okay.
comfortable in. I don't know how
So, do you
that'll.
have a particular example in mind, like a player where you're like, "Okay, we couldn't throw MPJ on this person, and that forced someone else out of position."
I'm trying to think of who that could be, but on some level, it's like there are players where they're either a really quick guard or a really forceful downhill driver that we don't really have anyone for. And in that situation, it's just like you're just throwing whoever you can at it. But I like CB's ability to at least try to slow that person down. Like he did okay on SGA at times. Not like he solved anything. But I think like CB did better on.
Playoff Christian is different though,
Yeah.
because he was finally locking in defensively. The question was really more about, like, where's Denver gonna be in the regular season defensively? I'm less concerned about their playoff defense now, although I think they have less versatility, but in the regular season, um, I'm worried about the continued lack of a combo, high motor, high IQ athlete that KCP was, that kind of, again, kept everybody in line and was, like, on it every night
Yeah.
kind of thing,
I know.
right? Because that just gives you a floor.
Yep.
Um, and I think that that's, like, what we need Peyton to be, but I don't think that you can teach motor. I think you either have it or you don't. And Peyton has the unfortunate combination at this point in his career. He's got all these tools, and we've seen his defensive, or like close to his defensive ceiling, hopefully, uh, on like, in flashes on certain nights. But he's got the unfortunate combination right now of like not being a high motor. I won't call him low motor, but he's not high motor, and he's still like very much not fundamentally sound, either on ball or off ball, so you can't really rely on him consistently. So it's kind of a tough spot that we're in if Peyton isn't a better point of attack defense guy, because you could say, like, we're giving Christian a bit of an excuse because he gives us a little bit more offensive juice as a starter than KCP did, but he's not able to focus his energy, like all of his energy, into that side of the floor like he was when he was coming off the bench.
Hmm.
So I think that we need Peyton to, like, be that guy, because I don't think that they're gonna be able to address that in an effective way, either in free agency or, like, we'll see what happens at the trade deadline and things like that, but I think if Peyton's gonna be on this team, that's, like, the floor of what needs to happen in terms of what function he's fulfilling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, even with all these signings, we didn't like sign some guy like KCP where you're so much more confident about the overall defense of the team, though I think they're shoring it up a little more. But there's not like the one guy that you're talking about that's going to be like that KCP archetype. And PWAT could be like that. CB screen navigating needs improving. I think PWAT can be good in that sense, but he's still like long. So it's sometimes hard to get around that, even though he's skinny. Um, but yeah,
He's better at screen. I'll give him that. He's
yeah,
probably the, like, best, maybe second best screen, not screen navigator, because I think there's like a totality thing, but like he can fight over screens better than anybody because of his recovery.
yeah,
Like he's got the margin for error with
elite
his recovery
cover.
because of the
Yeah,
length.
that's what
Yeah.
sells it. But Yeah, I also just like think about Piwat's playing time as well and
Hmm.
how that's going to look because Duran's going to be at the 4. Like thinking about
Well,
bench
we don't know how much
lineups.
Duran's going to play either.
I get
The
that he's
thing
coming
with
off the
the
Achilles,
thing
but
that, like, I think a lot of people miss with with the last, like, 2 years really, but especially last year with Peyton, is, like, because he played the 4, he actually got to play a lot more because of that, because he wasn't fighting exclusively for
minutes.
minutes at the 3, and we had shooting guards.
Yeah.
So, I think this season he's gonna be fighting for time more as you're sort of it feels like that's the direction I assumed you were going with that,
Yeah.
just because of where the depth chart is at with this team right now.
Hmm.
And so we need him to be able to do a thing that nobody else on the roster does. Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense to him for him to be playing minutes or frankly to be on the team. So yeah, it's a big year for him
And if you
in that
have
sense.
him out there playing with Hardaway Jr., let's say his 3 is more reliable than not, it makes it easier to play him more minutes because
That's
sometimes
true.
sometimes the
That's true.
concern is
So there's
just
like a give and take.
I didn't want to play him just because of the lack of spacing, but if all you're looking for is just for him to play aggressively defensively and to hold up, I definitely like the chances of that being the case more than needing him to be everything that he needed to be because the roster was so limited. So
Yeah.
you're improving your chances with like everyone, and I think you made that point too that like having these guys here helps their development process because now there's just like more things covered by having all these players out here, and you're not relying
That's
on them to
true.
do everything. Though I think some of the best teams in the NBA are people who employ lineups where everyone can do a little bit of
A little bit
everything.
of everything. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's true, but there's sort of maybe less that Peyton has to do. Now he maybe has a more focused role,
which may
both
be good for
offensively and
young
defensive.
guys before they
Yeah,
take on other
exactly.
responsibilities.
Exactly. So there's like a give and take there. Obviously, he's gonna have more competition for those minutes on the wing than he had previously when he was playing the 4 because we didn't wanna play anybody else at that spot, because the only guy behind him was Zeke. I think that Peyton might regret like, only being like, "I only wanna play the 3," because it's a very different, universe when the only guy you're competing with for minutes is Ignacy.
Definitely,
Um, Tayshaun Prince Jr. Uh, that would be is that
that'd
wait,
be
is Tayshaun
great
Prince Jr. the Tayshaun Prince I'm thinking of? Because that's
from
good.
the old Detroit days.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't actually know if he was a junior, but let's just go with that.
I hope there's not some, like, Jalen McDaniels reference in there. Um, okay. So the things that we're watching next are we're looking for Christian Brown's extension. Really want to know what that number is going to look like. We get to Peyton Watson's extension. We've alluded to, some of the questions with him that are going to be coming up with that. Well, if Denver can't get an extension done with Peyton by August, and I think he becomes extension eligible on the 8th, which is Tuesday, alongside Christian. Does Denver let Peyton get to restricted free agency next summer to quote unquote play hardball with him, or do they trade him?
Oh, like would you factor the because would they extend him and trade him, or you just mean trade him before even considering an extension? I guess
You
it'd
can't
be
extend him
harder.
and
Oh
trade him
yeah, that's
because
right.
of
There's a
the
limit.
poison pill rules.
So I kind of want to play hardball a little bit, but I definitely would want to see how he plays next season before offering an extension.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't offer it this summer.
I think he'd probably prefer that too because I don't know that the number that Denver offers this summer is going to be to his liking,
Mm.
like based on what he's shown so far.
Yeah, I
Um,
just think he wouldn't because yeah, he probably bet on himself and not take that anyway. Like, does he really feel like he would have to accept that offer if they gave it to him just because it was there?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe he feels like, look, I'm gonna get to play the 3 this year. It's gonna be so much better. You know, year 4 P-Watt loading. He's been He'll walk next offseason. Yeah. My thing is, I think that if you're not going to figure out an extension this summer, you should probably trade him. He can't just walk, by the way, next offseason because he'll be a restricted free agent. Technically, Denver
You
has
have a choice to let him go or
the
not.
yeah, the rights to match whatever he gets from another team. So even if he got more money elsewhere, we would have the ability to match it. And let's say he did have the kind of season that gets him more money elsewhere, we'd probably want to match him at that point if he did actually play well enough to,
Hmm.
garner that kind of money in free agency. Um, but he's hanging out in Denver. He's working out in Denver this off season. I saw some. I think I saw a clip actually of him hanging out in summer league, and that's where the whole team's going to be starting next week when summer league opens. But summer league's just like a big networking event where people also watch basketball. So, I've heard reports of Jonathan Kuminga might have an opportunity to be meeting with lots of other teams and trying to get a deal done in his restricted free agency process. Um, so not that's not what Peyton would be doing because he's not a restricted free agent yet, but maybe Peyton is going to be there because he's trying to negotiate his extension with Denver right now, and figure something out there. I think those numbers are going to be really interesting to me. Like, I want to know how committed these guys are to Peyton and Christian and like the Booth boys,
Yeah.
as they're called.
I like where we're at though, because like you said, if Peyton proves himself and plays really well, you'd feel better about retaining him. But if he doesn't and you offered him a contract that reflected what he's put on the court so far, you're theoretically getting him on a little bit of a discount. But there is a line where you could overpay for him, but I feel like the chances of that happening, especially
If
right
you
now,
wait. Oh, right now.
yeah, especially right now, like just because he doesn't have the like pedigree to really get an overpay. Let's say he just
That's
signs
never
it.
stopped Denver before.
Well, but these people haven't been leading the front office of Denver
Yeah,
before,
that's true.
and
That's
they should be learning from the mistakes of the past and not be doing that. So I just feel like either Peyton's going to play up to his contract or up to any kind of offer where we would retain him, and that's great because he lived up to his potential. And if not, then we have a optionality to walk away from it or not, like whether it's a trade or what have you.
So your team don't extend him right now.
Well, unless it was
Your
like,
team let him get to restricted
unless they
free
gave him this
agency.
super team friendly
Okay.
option that was
Okay, I
like,
see.
hey, this is where we value you right now. And for some reason, he takes it because he just wants the security. And then it's like this very team friendly deal for him. Sure. I don't want it to be too long, though, whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I think there's actually a situation where the incentives align here, where Denver probably doesn't want a deal that's too long because they want the flexibility to be able to move it easily. And Peyton probably doesn't want it to be too long because if he does end up playing up to his kind of perceived potential and is way better than that, then he'll be able to enter free agency sooner and get more money on his next deal, right? Um, yeah, so I'm very interested to see what happens with that. Last thing here, and this was brought to my attention, something I didn't really consider, but Cam Johnson is actually extension eligible this summer. All right, some more. Will Ben Wallace want to extend Cam Johnson this summer before he gets the Jokic bump? Now, to
Oh,
be for reference or for context here, Cam has the same length deal as MPJ. So he has this upcoming season and then one more year left on his deal. He's extension eligible. You can add up to 3 years on his current contract. He's only making the plus of this is that he's only making $22 million, or is that right? Where am I? Oh yeah, $21 million next year. 13% of the cap. So you're extending off a pretty reasonable number right now. Obviously the durability questions are outstanding, but what do you think of the prospect of Cam Johnson being extended this summer, especially after like they technically did just invest a pretty valuable future first round pick in him. So you're kind of weighing flexibility of him being on a shorter deal versus security of, like, you've managed an asset and, like, kept a good player. So,
I would
where you
try
at?
to, just because he hasn't been on this huge contending team. He has the durability questions. Um,
I mean, he
he
was on
is,
the Suns that won
yeah,
61 games and
for
went to the
sure, and that's
finals.
why he got that first round pick for him. But yeah, the Jokic bump, you could really price yourself super high, and like we're already been top heavy as hell. I guess I couldn't be mad at it, even though it would be hard to know how he's going to play out. Let's say he does have injury problems throughout his time in Denver. You're going to be bad about any extension that we give for him. Um, but yeah, I could see with the Jokic bump, because right now his numbers are like almost identical to MPJ's in some senses, and I imagine that'll go up playing for the Nuggets. And
Maybe not. I don't know how many
yeah, maybe
like,
not.
if he won't get as many, he'll be efficient, right? But I
Yeah,
don't know
he's
about the
very efficient.
opportunities.
I also think he has the potential to look really good as a non-Jokic player, which will show like he's going to beat the allegations of being like, well, he's only played with Jokic because he's had a career outside of Denver, and I think he's going to look good in non-Jokic minutes because he is just efficient no matter what, like in a vacuum. But it's like I don't know. I'm almost afraid to tie myself to anyone who's like a third option because of the CBA and how this is, where it's like you have your two big guys and then you kind of fill out around that. So
And Cam is 29 is
I
the other
know,
thing.
yeah. So it's like it's a tough call. Whatever Ben and John would want to do, I'd be fine with it as long as it's not like a crazy contract. I would be nervous giving him a big number before we really see how it works out, but I would be
Yeah.
fine doing it before he like is taking off into this like all-star level player, which I don't know. I don't think he's going to get to that level, but
Fringe all-star,
yeah,
maybe?
which
Yeah.
is what we need. Like that's not a disappointment for me. It's just all-star is really hard to get, as you know, as the Denver Nuggets fan.
Well, all right, so let's talk about my ideal sort of rest of the off season, and we'll sort of wrap this up. I had a segment prepared about what things would have been available without some of the bad moves in the past, but I think I wanna save that for another show so that we can spend more time on it. The Jonas news kind of, took over that, which is fine. But let's talk about my ideal rest of the off season, and Will, just feel free to, chime in with what you think of these different things as I kind of go through them.
This is the end of your ideal off season.
Uh, well, this is the rest. This is what the things that I want to happen for the rest of the
Okay,
summer and also the trade deadline.
gotcha.
Okay. Okay. So the first one is Ben Wallace somehow miraculously figures out a way to trade Zeke for Aya Moose straight up. Uh, and or add in Pickett to that trade as like a sweetener because we have a backup guard in IO now.
Hmm.
What do you think of that one?
I mean, that would be amazing. Everyone would be, as much as I think Io has been a target for Nuggets fans for so long that I get that there's almost this funny overhyping about him.
Yeah.
But if you're just moving Zeke and
I
Pickett
didn't
for
say
him,
TJ McConnell.
yeah,
Okay.
good for you. Yeah, that would be an amazing trade.
Although, let
Everyone
me see
would
if
love
that
that.
money works out. I just want to check real quick. If we added Zeke plus Pickett, could we get TJ McConnell? Zeke is currently, because his deal is descending, 8, and Pickett's on. We could totally Zeke plus Pickett for TJ McConnell is actually way better. Well, no, because Io's younger, and Denver would, like, lock up a young backup guard for, like, years to come, so I think that's probably, like, on paper makes more sense for Denver, but obviously I'd prefer TJ McConnell. Okay. Next one, we actually just got news during the show of the full summer league roster, and it looks like Hunter Tyson is indeed playing in summer league. And so my
This
next
third year playing at Summer
yes.
League.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh my next move here is that Hunter does really well in summer league and showcases himself, and some team decides to trade us a couple of future second round picks for Hunter Tyson.
Yeah, sure. Ideal. I don't think that's going to happen, but yeah. A
So
couple second round picks.
a
That's a
couple
lot.
well, I had one written in my notes, but I got a little greedy because when you think about it, when Hunter Tyson looks good in summer league, he looks great. Like this is like, whatever the stretch that RJ Hampton had before the Aaron Gordon trade, like is that not how Hunter looked in his first summer league? Like at least
Yeah,
that
it looked
good?
a little more exciting. Yeah.
Okay. Um so the next thing I would do then is use the roster spot that we gained from the Hunter trade to sign Chris Boucher and shore up our forward depth in case, again, rookie now Deron Holmes needs to be brought along slowly or just isn't good yet because he's a first year NBA player. Alternatively, Spencer Jones, who has been tendered a two-way qualifying offer, finally accepts it. For some reason, hasn't yet, which I find interesting. Like, come on, dude. Denver is offering you a spot here. And then we could use him to fill in those backup forward minutes. And then in the regular season, and then just re-sign DJ to be the locker room glue guy, which if Valanciunas leaves, we might actually need him to fill backup center minutes too. But it actually might not be that bad in terms of just like totality of the front court if you had a DJ and either Spencer Jones or Chris Boucher, because you'd have like a real five, even though it's DJ and he is like almost 37, and a real forward next to him. Obviously Zeke is
Um,
still there, but I want an alternative to that.
Boucher is definitely a
Too.
name chat has been throwing around as a
Yeah,
replacement
he's still in
for
the free agent market
Valančiūnas
too.
if
So
something goes wrong there. Carter Bryan says, should we just waive Tyson and sign Tamar Bates to a, I don't know what that would be, a
have you seen
two-way?
Tamar Bates? Are we looking at Summer League and if Tamar Bates is good? I mean, I don't know. It's like Tamar Bates is like a scorer, and that's not really what I'm looking for in like the ball handler. If we're getting a scorer, I'd prefer it on the like a bigger wing.
His
In
defense is
terms of like
supposed to
on
be
ball
good.
creation. His defense is supposed to be good. Okay, I
Yeah,
hadn't
that's what
heard
I
that from
heard.
CT. I think we're watching summer league just to see what happens. I think it's interesting that Denver so far hasn't filled out all 15 roster spots because the situation that I talked about with Spencer Jones, who's
Am
at
I
least, if he takes it is on a two-way, could hop in with Tamar Bates as well. Maybe he's the POA defender that we've been looking for. Who knows?
I'm not sure. If CT didn't bring it up now, I'm like, uh-oh, but that's kind of what I saw
Well, I
some people
haven't
talking about that.
he didn't say he was bad. I just
Okay.
haven't heard from
Okay.
CT too much about Tamar
Oh yeah,
Bates.
Trey
So,
did look good in Summer League. Summer League is such a weird thing.
well, it's a good thing we didn't sign him to a standard deal because he didn't look good in NBA minutes. Like there is a difference between summer league and the NBA. Um,
Did we get any updates on this Valančiūnas thing? Are you just
uh,
talking about?
check Mark Stein's tweets.
I
Okay,
mean, Mark Stein
let's
was.
find out.
We are live
Mark
right now.
Stein
Not
said
checking
that
this.
I will check it right now. So Mark Stein previously said that Denver is nope. Denver's trying to lobby Valanciunas to stay in the
So
States.
it's the
That's the
same.
update.
Okay, yeah, we talked about that.
Instead of going for a buyout.
Don't scare
Uh,
us, chat.
yeah.
The
Please
last
don't
thing we
scare us.
heard was we're
Yeah.
trying to negotiate with Valančiūnas, and we think we are gonna get him to stay.
And even like we don't have to do anything technically. He's under contract with Denver. Even if he wanted to buy out, Denver would have to agree. So they could play hardball with him. He might not like it, but worst case scenario, you've got a disgruntled backup big. Like I think that should be the worst case scenario instead of the one where they buy out his entire $10 million and just let him go for not for nothing. That would be bad because it would count against our cap and we just lost the backup center. That's the worst case scenario. But the actual worst case scenario, the floor should be we have an unhappy backup big that's here but is under contract, so he has to play. All right. My next ideal offseason thing is that Christian signs for a 4-year, $90 million deal, which seems like such a short changing after all these extensions that we talked about on the last show. I think that averages out to like 22.5 million per year. But it would be the kind of deal where it's like ascending and Maybe you put a player option on the end, but I don't like the idea of that either. I just say give him the guaranteed money and then see if he takes it, and if he does, then great. Um, that would be my ideal thing. How do you feel about that
Four for
contract?
90.
Yeah,
So that's, what is that a year again?
22 and a half.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
The next one I've got here for Peyton is that he signs for a 3-year, $33 million contract and then just ends up being good. Like, is like a good, like solid wing, like nothing special, but just does what Denver needs him to do, and is sort of the level of like a
Well,
oh, okay.
CB's made a lot less money in his career, but I love
Yeah.
it.
AG also got a player option for his trouble, and I don't want to give Christian player options. So,
Hmm.
um,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Peyton 3 for 33. Where do you think, if the Nuggets did offer him an extension today, what kind of number do you think they would try to offer him?
I think they should offer him something like 3 for 33, like
So somewhere in this
sub
range.
mid-level. The mid-level is probably gonna be a lot closer to like 17 next year, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was closer to like 3 for 45. That makes sense, right? So it's 15 a year instead of, what is this, 11 a year? Um, for the next few seasons, and I would have is it better to just do that fully guaranteed so that he's more likely to accept it? Probably. Like, I don't think you wanna put a team option on the end because that would be, if I were the player, a non-starter for me. Because the whole idea of going with a shorter deal is trying to get to free agency more quickly if I outplay that contract. So if anything, it's a player option, but I would prefer not a player option, so I would just do 3 years fully guaranteed and call it a day, and hopefully he takes it. Um Next thing I've got is Jamal comes into camp in shape. This is probably the best thing that could happen all off season. Don't you think?
Probably. It is funny how much Jamal and discussions around him have been a little lost with all these signings. Not that we need to be talking about it,
I mean,
um,
yeah.
but it's
Is there
just like,
something about Jamal that you wanna bring
no,
up?
no, not at all. But I think before the MPJ trade happened, it was kind of like, will it be MPJ or maybe a Jamal trade somewhere down the line, like to improve the roster? And now that it's MPJ, I feel like Jamal's a little more cemented, which I feel good about. I like Jamal with Jokic and on this team,
Yeah.
if he comes into shape, especially. But I guess there's always questions about that. And every year I say I'm confident he will come in shape because at some point he'll have to.
You did
Um,
use the word confident a lot last summer.
I know. I was like, there's no way with all this shit talk about
There's no
him.
possible way.
But I did kind of forget that he was taking it easy with the like extension talk and him not wanting to get hurt. I guess I underestimated that dynamic of it. But I'm back on confident Jamal train and with this team. Although I did want to talk about how he would fit with Valančiūnas, because I've heard some mixed things about like, can he throw
And he
lobs? Is
oh,
JV gonna be a
I
lob
mean,
threat?
JV's not a lot, like, no, that's not
Yeah.
you've heard Matt Moore thinks that Jamal Murray's not a good lob finder. He's probably right about Jamal's sort of limited court vision in that particular sense, but when I feel like it's more sort of medium in terms of him finding them, and then he's good at throwing them.
I also
Jonas
think he
is not
plays
a
with
lob
Jokic
threat.
a lot.
Yeah,
So how's he going to be looking for that
that's true.
a ton?
But Jonas is not a lob threat. He would probably play with Jonas the way that he plays with Jokic, more as a handoff hub
Which is
and
cool.
that kind of
He's
thing,
used to that.
which yeah, just like we talked about this during the season. It's like Dario was kind of a disaster, but the minutes that were okay with Dario were when he played with Jamal and Russ off the floor, right? And it seemed like it wasn't great offense or anything like that. It was just like, okay, this seems coherent. Like everybody sort of knows what to do. And that's sort of how I envision things going with Val as well.
Hmm. I also just think Jamal plays better with centers that are bigger bodied, like regardless of if they're lob threat or not, because of that like handoff and screen aspect. And I like Jonas for that,
Yeah, absolutely.
because you saw that with like DJ too in some ways. Anyway,
Yeah, and DJ was also the lob threat that we got
yeah.
sometimes. The difference is that when Jamal was getting like blitzed up the floor. Like DJ can't put the ball on the floor and like, attack a 4-on-3 if it's too high up the floor. Although he would like occasionally, if they blitz too low, then DJ catches the ball in the middle of the paint and he could do something there. But if it was too high up, he can't put the ball on the floor. Jonas actually would be a much better sort of 4-on-3 threat, which is another reason that it'd be, best case scenario if they just convince him to stay, play out the year, play for a championship, and see what it is. I hope Jonas just doesn't. We've talked so much about like the guys that Jokic sort of clearly hates, and I think Jonas is one of them. Or he doesn't hate all these other guys, but I think he might actually hate Valančiūnas. Like he cooks Val in a way that he doesn't cook literally anybody else in the NBA. And Valančiūnas struggles defensively, but Jokic is just like never this aggressive against any player,
He
especially
does have
veteran
big
players.
games against him.
Yeah, his
I,
biggest games in his career.
I'm just gonna say that's just because of the player that he is, not that
Okay.
Jokic hates him. Let's just go with that.
The player that Val is?
Yeah.
Okay. You think he's that bad defensively? That might be worse for
Not that he's bad defensively, it's just like the matchup of Jokic isn't favorable to
Yeah,
him.
but Jokic's aggression level, that's not matchup dependent.
Was it matchup dependent in terms of who was around
Like who
Valančiūnas on the
who
team?
Jokic wants to shoot like 20 times in the regular season in like January
And this was
against.
when he
That's
was on the
only
Pelicans, though, right?
Jonas. I think it was true on the Wizards too. Didn't he have a 56-point
They
game?
beat us.
They won that game, but Jokic had 56. Like, come on, Will. There's something there.
Jonas must have said something to him
He must have
to
said
goad him
something.
into going to 56 because the Nuggets lose a lot of the times when Jokic
I
is scoring high
bet
points.
Jonas said something to him in Jokic's like rookie or like sophomore year or something. Yeah, Val cooks us too. That's the other thing.
The
Val always has
Serbian-Lithuanian rivalry.
huge rebounding games against Jokic, which is what makes me hopeful for his prospects as a bench rebounder. All right. So the last thing that I want to talk about with like ideal rest of the offseason / trade deadline is what I want to happen at the trade deadline. So if Denver goes into the season with an open roster spot, they can remain and they stay under the first apron with whatever moves they make next. If they do anything next, they might just stop here. They remain eligible to sign somebody like Chris Middleton on the buyout market after the trade deadline. Obviously, you need him to want to come to Denver, but it would be amazing if he did, and this is my ideal offseason, not, reality. So, because Denver stays under the first apron, they can sign anybody off the buyout market as opposed to only guys that previously made this year $14 million or less. Chris Middleton obviously making like $30 million this season. Another buyout candidate that is going to be out there and people might have mixed feelings about him because of what he's done to your team, but CJ McCollum is going to be another prime buyout candidate from the Washington Wizards on an expiring contract, so they might try to buy him out at the deadline as well. And he might want to go to a competitive team before the playoffs. Both of these guys, if Chris is healthy, and if CJ's healthy too, still have juice. And yeah, Middleton for sixth man of the playoffs. Could you imagine? Like that would be incredible. I see Brogdon and Melton, people wanting Brogdon and Melton. I don't think those are buyout guys. One, because they're both still
these were
free
comments
agents.
from earlier, but just
I
throwing out
see.
some other names to bring. Not that this would be a buyout option, but
Yeah, I think some people have been throwing out the Brogdon and Melton names as people to get to fulfill that sort of ball handler creator type. Not so much creator, but like ball handler for both of them. I wouldn't mind Melton on a minimum and just kind of taking a flyer on the upside should he be able to stay healthy. Brogdon, I'm just kind of like, I don't know if he'll play 30 games. I don't know if Melton will either, but I feel like he's worth the upside play. Whereas even if you get 30 games from Brogdon, how much more is he giving you than like Jalen Pickett would? Is that crazy to say? To the point where you want to use a roster spot on him is all.
Brogdon?
Yeah.
Yeah, he could be
Like,
done
he
in
is
some
better
ways.
than Jalen Pickett when he can play, but
Pickett
it's
is
not like
young
in a
and can
way that
actually play.
that Pickett can't give you in terms of, like, the style of play. So I'd rather have if I'm gonna have 2 guards that can take that spot, I'd rather have one that has, that does things a little bit differently than Jalen Pickett does.
Right.
Plays with maybe, like, a little more speed, maybe gets downhill a little bit more easily. Uh,
Although, did you hear
yeah.
this thing that KD said where he was like the 6 foot 6'1" guard type? I just don't see it anymore. You have to be either a bulldog type or be tall to be in the NBA. And I'm like, Pickett is a bulldog type. So
Yeah,
based
he is
on
a
KD's
bulldog type.
standards, that bodes well for Pickett.
Okay. At least doesn't bode poorly.
Yeah. Dame. The only reason I'm not speculating about Dame right now is because he's going to be out an entire year. So unless
Yeah.
he wants to come sign now, and he would just be taking up a roster spot, but he could come next
Yeah.
summer as well too. That'd be sick. But Brogdon, Melton, 50 minutes per game. Yeah, I don't know. We
Can you
need
get
someone.
50 games out of either of those guys is my question. Like, that's why they're still on the free agent market.
Could we
Otherwise, these
get
guys would have been snapped up already.
Could we get 50 games out of Middleton?
We don't need 50 games out of Middleton. We just need him to last until the deadline, be healthy then, and then get signed and then help us in the playoffs.
I see. Yeah, because he wouldn't come until.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Now, that's a
That'd be
tough
sweet.
situation, the Middleton ones in particular, because the the way that he would get to the buyout market is that the Wizards can't find a trade, and it's more likely that the Wizards can't find a trade because he hasn't been healthy all year, and another team doesn't wanna give up $30 million in, like, matching salary for the risk of either injured at that time or has been injured a lot that season, Chris Middleton. Um, so then the Wizards would opt to buy him out, but you never know. You just never know what other teams might be interested in getting and not getting. You're just kind of hoping that Chris makes it to that point healthy, and then wants to come to Denver. That would be sick, I think.
Yeah. Sounds like a great off season. I already feel like I'm having my ideal off season, but these would just sweeten it up.
Cherries on top.
Yeah.
No, like we said, like these things are finishing touches. Now, I do think that if the Valanciunas thing doesn't work out, like Denver is in a really tough spot and needs to do something more. Whereas right now, I wouldn't love going into the season with the roster just as is because I would like them to do some things on the edges. Um, but I would be okay with them going into the season with this roster, whereas if the Valanciunas thing didn't go through, then it's like, okay, no, like they have to do more before the end of the summer. All right. Well, let's get to the actual, the main topic here. They say the championship isn't won in June, but haven't the last few championships been won in the off season? You
Yeah.
know, 2023, Denver adding KCP and Bruce and Jamal coming back from his ACL. 2024 for that championship, Boston adds Kristaps, moving Marcus Smart that allows them to promote Derek White, and then they add Drew Holiday. And everybody, and this is like the thing is, even though Denver wasn't prognosticated at the time to be like, oh, these are the moves that are putting them over the top to be a contender. And I know this because the way I started following the team was just like, I don't understand why everybody's saying this isn't a real title contender in 2023 in the playoffs, right? But the
Yeah.
next year with Boston, everybody was like, they're the title favorites, you know?
Yeah.
And even though Boston was the title favorites the year after that, OKC was not far behind them after they added Caruso and Hartenstein in that summer. So, adding to that, is Denver that team this year, at least so far with what you've seen from the offseason, that could be like, we're looking back from this a year from now and it's like, well, yeah, obviously that was the team because they made these moves to put themselves in position to be the last team standing.
I feel less confident about this one than I did when we added KCP and Bruce, where I was like, texting everyone I knew, being like, "This is the best roster the Nuggets have ever had. We could win it this year. This is the time." Also, there was less threats then. I hate to say that because
Yeah.
I don't want to build the narrative more that Nuggets didn't play competitive teams, but
Yeah, but I love
um,
ragging on other teams.
yeah,
Mm. Like the Suns. People were so desperate for a threat that they're like, well, they traded their entire cupboard for Kevin Durant right before the end of the season, but that's a real contender, let me tell you.
oh yeah, that was ridiculous. I used to say this, especially in the Warriors days. I'm like, the NBA championship is determined in the offseason. Who can build the biggest like super team? That was like how it was back then. And I always thought someone's gonna build a team to finally go with the Warriors, and there just wasn't that team there, especially once KD left, or KD went to Golden State. But I still think we're like there where we could be that team where we look back and say, hey, they had the best offseason. It's one of those scenarios again. I think I'm just less confident than when we won the title, but I do feel a lot better. I think I want to see it a little bit more rather than like declaring it in the offseason,
Right.
even though I'm tweeting like Nuggets
Just
have
give
the
us the Larry
title.
O'Brien today, right
Yeah.
now. Let's jump, like, hop on a plane over to Oklahoma City and tell them to give it to us back right now.
Yeah. I'm glad.
Arguably the best Nuggets roster of all time, Jeremy Selby. I think a lot of people, a lot of I've seen the question popping around, is this roster better than the title year? Assuming again Jonas stays. I don't know about that. Uh I think personally this roster is probably a little bit better offensively, but has less defensive versatility by like by enough to where it matters. But as we talked about, the Western Conference has all these defensive teams now. So who cares about your defensive versatility if all these teams are more defensively skewed? They should be easier to guard in terms of like on aggregate. Like their offenses aren't terribly complex and all of that. At least relative to more offensively skewed teams. And Denver, again, is one of the last sort of good teams in the West that is more of an offensive team. If you're counting just like the top, the teams that made the top 8 last year, it was really just Denver and the Lakers that weren't good defenses, and Lakers weren't a good offense either. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah.
um,
I mean,
oh
if
yeah, go
people
ahead.
buy the narrative and the argument that we were so close with OKC that we just needed a couple more pieces and a couple more guys and we just got them, then you could be like, yeah, we just put ourselves over the top. I think it's basketball in the NBA is a little more complicated than that for sure.
Yeah.
But like I said before, we're putting ourselves in the best position, at least so far from the moves that I've seen, and addressing the issues that I observed last year. Granted, they didn't like get these lockdown defender guys, but I like overall what we can bring, and I wouldn't be surprised if we win the title and we look back and we say, "Hey, that was the moves we made." That's mostly a credit to Jokic and Jamal and AG, and just like putting these guys around them and letting them do their thing.
Yeah. Let's see. I think this roster beats OKC in 6. Yeah, but do they beat next year's OKC in 6? Because OKC is probably going to get better next year. Their oldest dudes aren't that old, and their youngest dudes are getting better, right?
Yeah,
They're all on the right side of the aging curve. So,
but I do get it was like DJ was on that team, Jeff Green was on that team, so you could argue like Jonas is better than DJ, and I don't know what player you would compare to Jeff Green at
I
this
think it's
point.
more about how the pieces fit. Like, I have
Right,
more
then
questions about
one
how
for
these
one.
pieces fit, but you guys, like, I wasn't following the team when during the 2022 off season before the title, right? So I'm sure there were some questions at the time about how everything would fit too, and then it's just like, well, we have to see it on the floor. But once it starts clicking, that's when you can start, um, getting
Different.
excited. It
I
took a long time
knew,
for Denver's defense to click that season though, right? Weren't they like 29th in defense for the first like 2 months of the season?
man. I don't remember being that low, but that could be. I felt like KCP and Bruce are going to be dream fits, just like I feel like Cam's going to be a dream fit. But I have more questions about like
Mm,
Bruce and Tim Hardaway. But that's just because they're just like they're on minimums for a reason. So it's like could go either way. But I think they're going to
so
be great.
okay.
Sadly, Valančiūnas is leaving. Do we get another report?
I think people are just dooming right now. Spencer Jones re-signed with the Nuggets on a two-way contract. Let's go.
Spencer Jones.
All right. So one like half of one of my off-season points has happened. Now we just need him to play well enough to earn himself a standard spot. Actually, to use him in the regular season, he can just be on a two-way. So they
Mm.
don't have to do any of that. Um, let's see if there's any other news on this before I move on. No, and there's nothing on Valančiūnas yet. Like, I don't think we're gonna have an answer to that until at least after the deal with the Kings is final,
Final. Yeah, because they
which
can't.
is
Nuggets people can't even comment on it until
right.
the
Like
deal's
people in the
done.
organization
Yeah.
can't comment on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, in terms of defensive rating, Nuggets were 26th in October of 2020, the title year, like the title season, I should say. And then in November, they were better than that. Well, they were 19th. Okay. So trending up. And then finally in December, that was a rough one, right? Because it wasn't December the month where you guys had where the team had the like 3-game losing streak before the Portland game where Jamal hit the shot that like turned the whole season around
Oh,
and that whole mythos.
I guess so. Yeah. Damn,
So
I
that
remember
December,
so
they were
little of that.
18th in defense. So, wasn't great. Then January is when it really, kicked into gear. Yeah, they were 4th in
I kind of felt
January.
like my recollection of that season was like that we were dominating the whole season and then just took the last season off or the last month off.
Well,
And
the
then
Blazers were the number 1 seed in the West after the first, like, 20 games.
they were the first in the West.
Yeah. It
Oh
was like
Jesus,
it was like 15 to 20 games in.
I don't remember them being good.
A
That's
lot of
funny.
those, like, screenshots were circulating because people were like, "You see, you can't take the beginning of the season that seriously in terms of what it means for how good these teams actually are." I think they were winning a lot of close games. It was, like, a lot of, you know, clutch performances. Um All right. So my last note here was just I wanted to make a couple comments about the youth on the team, in particular, Peyton, Julian, even Christian to a lesser extent. I think it'll be good for some pressure to be taken off of them to be good right away, even though now we're talking about it in Peyton's case, his third year. He is likely going to be playing in a contract year either way, though. But how do you feel about the balance between the runway that these guys have to, like, make mistakes and, like, play through things versus having competition for those spots?
Hmm.
Especially, like, we're really talking about Peyton and Julian here.
I like on a championship contender team having competition rather than a runway because I don't want to like we just saw with Project Dynasty. I don't want to sacrifice our ability to be competitive just to give young guys runway. And I get that developing is still important. Like Christian, I'm not worried about. I don't think he needs runway anymore. He's fine. He's getting minutes. Peyton, if he's playing a role like you kind of laid out, where you just want him to have a defensive focused role, I think he can do that, and I don't think he needs much more runway for that.
Yeah. Um, I think it's kind of the time where it's kind of put up or shut up for him.
Yeah,
As a third year, it's a little different for Julian as a second year.
yeah. For Julian, he might
Or
need a little more
he's going
runway.
into his third year. For Peyton, he's going into his fourth year. Oh my gosh. Wow, time flies. Um, but actually, I'll just ask my next question because it's kind of related. But did Denver kind of do this the wrong way in terms of the order of operations, at the way that they're developing these young guys? So, like, for example, like what I mean is, should Peyton and Julian, basically all the non-Christian Booth boys, have had more vets taking the pressure off the early part of their careers and then runway after that to like fully just kind of at least have runway to work through like the kinks in their game, uh or do you think having runway and maybe you don't like them to have runway at all in championship contender, but do you think having runway is more valuable in the earliest developmental years just because of how formative they are? I feel like we're talking about them like babies when I use this language, by the way. Development and formative years.
I don't think runway is like important right away, like in your rookie season. Oh, I think it's only important if you're like a high draft guy. Like you come in,
Mm,
you're in the first half of the draft, you need playing time right away. For guys that are later in the draft, where you're not expecting so much from them, I don't think they need playing time right away. I think they're fine, like, let's say, riding the bench and just like learning, observing, and that. Once they get past that, then I think runway becomes more important and then just like falls off the longer they play, where it's like there's like a sweet spot, I think, where it's like you need to start giving
like
them
at some
time.
point the runway runs out also. Like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
plane has
it
to
is
take
limited.
off, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're crashing into the hangar.
Hmm.
Um But yeah, and that's kind of like what you're describing is like Christian for the first part of his rookie season was literally riding the bench. Because Davon Reed was in the rotation, right?
Yeah.
Uh
But he's definitely
Peyton
was not a typical case where he definitely
okay.
surprised everybody.
Peyton was in the G League for most of his rookie year and then came in, obviously is coming off the bench anyway when he starts to play in the rotation in his second year and again in his third year. Uh Actually, Christian played 76 games his rookie season, so I don't know what I'm talking about. Um, so their first years, I would say they didn't have runway, but every year after that, I feel like they've had quite a lot, especially Christian in the early part of his sophomore year when they're like, "We need a backup point guard. You do some things," and then it was like, "Oh gosh." Christian actually got a lot of runway. I felt like he was not good in the early part of that season to the point where I was just like, "Oh my god, what happened to this guy that was who he was as a rookie?" Just because of the role that he was put in. Um, but I feel like he was able to stay on the floor because even though he was struggling in like that offensive role early and the defense wasn't good, he still wasn't like a high mistake player. Whereas I feel like Peyton is still like too much of a high mistake player for it's one of those things where you can earn yourself runway by at least like limiting the types of mistakes that you make. Like, if there are mistakes in the course of, like, doing a thing to figure out your game versus, like, missing a rotation and, you know, being too jumpy on, like, a particular player on a scouting report, like, that kinda stuff is just like, "Okay, it's not cute anymore." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
At some point, it's not cute anymore. At some point, the plane needs to take off. So, I just thought that was an interesting discussion to have as we have a team with more playable vets than we've ever had than we've ever had before. Because even in 2023, you had guys like Ish Smith and, by the end of the season, Thomas Bryant, DeAndre Jordan, who were just out of the rotation entirely, and they were just there to be locker room guys, and they weren't really gonna get in the way of anybody's development, unless, like, all the point guards were resting that game or whatever, in the case of Ish Smith. But now we have, like, everybody's playable so far, except maybe
Yep.
Hunter Tyson,
Yeah.
and Zeke, and maybe Deron, but not those are all young guys, right? Like, those are guys that are fighting those are guys who are ostensibly fighting for minutes, and that's just a different dynamic, so I'm really curious to see how that plays out for the team. Okay, so like I said, I want to save this last segment here for another show. Do we have any more questions about what's going on with the off season or
One
the
viewer brought up how they're thinking Greece would have to be the team to buy out Jonas, but that wouldn't be it. Denver would have to be the ones to buy him
Denver
out.
would buy him out? they could work out, technically, they could try to work out an arrangement where they where they bought out part of his contract and then let whatever he's getting from the other team offset the rest kind of thing. The details of a buyout aren't really important now. The question is like whether they're gonna do it or not. Um, they're important in that you wanna know if they are gonna buy him out, how much is gonna be kind of dead cap on our cap sheet right now. And that just that depends on whatever number Denver decides to buy him out for, but that like Denver would have to be the ones to buy him out because
We've
it's our contract.
we've also seen this happen a lot where players get traded to a team and they want a buyout and they're like holding out, trying to get a buyout. It usually doesn't just happen right away. It's not like
That's true.
I've never seen it happen where the player's like, I want to be bought out, and it happens like the next day. It usually drags out.
Even last year, we were talking about like when is this Russ trade going to be official, or like signing Russ on a minimum, but they had to wait for the Clippers to first agree to a trade with Utah.
Oh, yeah.
And then
Oh, and then they were doing the
Utah bought him
buyout.
out of, immediately after that, but you had to wait for the trade to happen first and, all of this stuff. So that's a concerning thing that you said that is also true, Will, because if there is gonna be a buyout, we won't necessarily know right away. It could take some time.
I guess in this case, Denver would be incentivized a little bit to move quicker on it because they're
Yeah.
not just going to be willing to have Valančiūnas riding the bench like in protest, not showing up to practices or not showing up to games or whatever the hell, and getting fined for it, like Andre Iguodala did to the Grizzlies. I don't know if he got fined and all that, but just that contract buyout situation went on for a long time. But we would want to get a guy in right away instead of him. So I feel like they'll probably have to make a decision on it, but it's not like Jonas has the edge to force Denver moving quickly on it right now.
Yeah.
Especially because it wasn't like agreed upon in the trade. Obviously, we traded because we wanted him.
Yeah. Obviously.
Yes.
And like you're talking about like holding out and being pouty. I just don't think that's gonna happen
Yeah, I'm hoping,
either
especially since
in the
you
case of
talked
Jonas.
about his personality.
Like,
I
he's
wouldn't
known as,
expect
like, a
that.
consummate professional locker room guy, all this stuff too, so I just don't think he would do that. It would just be, like, he is probably gonna be generally unhappy, um, um, but I don't think it would be as bad as, like, skipping practices and skipping games. That's the kind like, if he did that, that's, like, you're docking pay from the contract at that point, and then it's
Yeah,
like
what are you doing? But I think the tough part about this is he is getting this contract from this other team. So he's almost like, I don't really care about this current one. My money's already like quote unquote in the bag from this other team.
but
I
it's
just need to
not
get
if we
out.
don't let him go,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. It does make him a little more like
and
other
the longer that goes on too, like, the other team could just move on
yeah. I don't
because
think
they have their own roster to fill out.
I know, but how many times do these zero teams have a chance to get an NBA rotation player who should be playing in the NBA just
Well,
going to their
yeah, but
team?
they still have their own roster to fill out, and if they think Denver's just gonna take them into the season, they have to move on.
I
I don't
guess
know
so.
how, like, salary cap rules work in EuroLeague, but they can't just, like, leave that cap space open to sign him whenever Denver decides to let him go, like, they probably have to fill out their own roster.
Yeah. I mean, I hope we don't have to hold him against his will and have him be pouting like you said about him, but you
I
never
don't know.
know.
I'm not gonna lie, I'd do a lot of things for $10 million.
Come on, just play one season with Jokic and the Nuggets. You'll love it. Win a ring and retire. Go to EuroLeague. That's fine. Just give us one
Yeah.
season.
Well, yeah. If he really doesn't wanna be here that badly, then, like I said, trade deadline's a thing, but I don't think that Denver's gonna try to I don't think that Denver's gonna try to buy him out before that unless he's, like he really doesn't wanna be here that badly, then he'll end up renouncing um, the entire contract and, like, foregoing the rest of that money.
Hmm.
So,
Which makes me feel good about Denver at least, with like the worst case scenario of just not having him to play, which is what I want. At least it's not gonna like punish us or kill us in any way, really. Any remaining
Yeah.
thoughts? Any questions from the chat before we head out?
Come
I think,
on,
did we
guys. Give us
almost get to
views.
1,000 subs? We were
Oh
so
my
close,
gosh, did
Grace.
we?
We're at 996. 4
We're at
subs
990
away.
refreshed.
What are we at?
999.
What? No way.
Yeah.
One more sub. Someone give us to 1,000 before we head
1,000
out.
subscriber. Oh my gosh, that'd be so crazy. Wasn't expecting it today. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, we might not have got it if not for this Val move, so I guess we could thank him for that.
Yeah, thank you, Donatus or Bonus,
For this crazy
for
report and
this
setting
news.
the Nuggets world on fire when we were just celebrating our next championship early. Thank you, Druid Trading.
Do it. Subscribe. Okay, I could talk about, let's see. I could talk about one of the other. Oh, we didn't talk about this news, and I meant to bring it up during the show, but official word came down that we signed Jared Dudley to be
Oh yeah,
part
we didn't
of
talk about that.
David Adelman's coaching staff, and you had pretty positive things to say about him on our last show when we talked about the rumors that he was being interviewed for a potential lead assistant position.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was interest by other teams, including the Cavs, the Grizzlies, and I think the Knicks were also interested in him. But I don't think any of those teams, and I could be wrong about Memphis because they do have a new head coach, but I think we were the only ones that were offering him lead
Ooh, we
assistant.
did it.
So that's a
Celebrate.
position. Thank you, Jeremy. Yay, Jeremy
Yes.
Sullivan, your 1,000
Jeremy.
sub.
Lucky
Wow.
number 1,000. You brought us to our goal. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who ever subscribed. We did it. This is so cool.
We
Appreciate you guys.
did. I can't believe this, Will. Just a little over a year after starting the pod.
Yeah, 1 whole year. Well, yeah, this was our
We
first
should
whole
do like a
season.
celebration stream at some point, but you're like out of town next week. We'll do something when the off season slows down a bit.
Yes. Hopefully no one
Yeah.
unsubs and then we have to redo this.
Nah, we'll count it anyway.
Yes, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And it's at the perfect time too, because Nuggets are slated to have an amazing season next year. So can't wait to keep talking about it all with you. This offseason's been awesome so far, so we can just keep it going. And Jared Dudley signing is another good one. We were like on such a high with all the players and the coaching
Yeah.
moves too. But I don't think this will end up being too bad, this whole Valančiūnas thing, and I think it'll all be okay. Just got to work out some kinks.
Yes, we just got a report from Chris Haynes that Dame is open to signing with a team this offseason under the right terms and conditions as he continues rehabbing, but he's in no rush to make
Yeah.
a decision. So,
It was like he
I mean,
wants to
that makes
go
sense.
live in Portland while he rehabs, so I'm sure with whoever he'd sign with have to agree with that, which why wouldn't they?
We didn't talk about this on the last show either because it happened on the next day, but Damian Lillard, in case we're the only show you watch
Which is
on the
unlikely.
NBA free agency, NBA offseason news, the Milwaukee Bucks did waive Damian Willard, eh, to sign Miles Turner from the Pacers in a sign and trade. So there's like a whole like layers of stuff going on there between the Pacers and the Bucks, and we can talk about that maybe in a different episode when we talk about just kind of broader dynamics across the league. But what was your reaction to seeing the news that Dame had gotten waived?
Okay, my first reaction was I thought that was a shitty thing to do, and I was like, wow, I can't believe the Bucks did that. I can't believe this is where it's ending up for Dame. But then I saw the report that Dame was actually kind of happy about it, and I get that because
Yeah.
he gets off the contract, keeps the money, but gets to go wherever he wants. Like that's an amazing opportunity. So, and I don't think the Bucks were going to
And he
be that
wanted
good.
to go where he wanted when they traded him to Milwaukee when Portland traded him to Milwaukee a couple of years
Yeah,
ago.
he
So
wanted to go to the Heat. I don't think he realized it was going to be the Bucks, but he came around to it. Playing with Giannis seemed like a good opportunity. So then I was like, then there were reports that Giannis wasn't happy about it, but then there were reports that he actually did know about it and was excited about Turner. I don't know what the truth is with with regards to Giannis. But
apparently Giannis was at least involved in recruiting Miles Turner. I don't know if he knew what needed to be done, but I don't know.
oh
I find it so odd to think about a scenario where they're gonna waive the guy that they traded his sort of partner in crime, lead creator in Drew Holiday for in Dame without telling him. Like, because you don't want this guy to leave. I think that's just
yeah,
such a big
that's
risk. So
true.
I just don't believe that it
Yeah,
happened.
I thought that he just put out the report that he was mad because he just wants to seem like a
Right.
good guy.
Right. Which is like everybody wants to seem like a good guy, like in this kind of situation. And it's not to say that I don't know that he knew explicitly, but there are ways to kind of get this information to somebody in vague terms, like, you know what needs to be done type of thing. Like, I
hmm
100% do not believe that they traded Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma without Giannis knowing.
Right.
Like, I just don't
They're,
believe that straight
mm,
up.
what if
So
they know Giannis is so loyal, he would never leave because he's so like
they don't believe that though,
they're
because he's
scared?
been making comments almost every offseason about how he's watching what they're gonna
That's
do
true.
and like they need to stay
Maybe they
competitive.
call
This
this
is
bluff because he's like, I'm not ever leaving.
Well, then they're dumber than I think. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know, and I already don't feel that, like, highly about that front office,
I
so
did see these odds that came out from that site or
that's
that
that
graphic that
doesn't
had
mean
him.
anything. These are they're just there to take your money on dumb shit.
Yeah, I wonder what Dame probably still wants to be a starting point guard,
Yeah.
even after he comes back. Fun, good comment from Dusty Old Cowtown. Can you guys do a pod introducing yourselves? How you just started the pod? Oh, well, if you want to dig through our entire video history on we have a playlist of all our episodes. You could go to the first one. We will look a lot different there and probably sound way different there, but we do talk about that. But
We
um,
have a full episodes playlist that you can check out on the channel, and I'm looking at it now. There was the first episode, but there's also the one that you and I did in person where
oh
we
yeah,
talked more about this stuff, like kind of background of the show as well, which we don't have the episodes like numbered, but I don't know. I like going back and watching our
mm.
episodes. I think it
But
was the reacting to Summer League
yeah, that was the summer. We
episode.
were so high on Trey Alexander then.
Yeah.
But the short and sweet of it for you, Dusty Old Countdown, is we're Nuggets Twitter people, and we talked on Twitter, and we said, let's just take this to the pod, and that's what we did, and so here we are.
Yeah.
But we could go. We can talk about it more another time if you would like.
We could talk about that kind of thing on a celebration of getting to 1,000 subs kind of stream,
A little,
which we'll
a little
maybe do
reflection.
within the next like month or so. We'll try
Would
to do
Dame be
something like
good on
that.
the Nuggets?
Um, well, no, because he's torn his Achilles right
Well,
now.
let's say he was healthy.
Yeah, like he's a lead guard creator. That's kind of the kind of player I'd like us to get. He's a good shooter too.
His
Um,
defense next to
and
Jokic, did that
frankly, I
worry
think
you?
he just didn't work with Giannis because Giannis is not like a great off-ball player. Uh, and I think all the players that we have, because they're Jokic ball guys, they're all like good off-ball players, and so is Jokic. So if Dame wanted to have the ball in his hands a lot of the time, he could. Um, the fit with Jamal is maybe quite clunky, especially defensively. But yeah, like I don't see a reason that he wouldn't be able to work on the Nuggets. He's a good basketball player with a skill. Pair him with Jokic. It's gonna be good,
I would love him
probably.
as a backup. What do you want to come do that?
Probably not.
Damn.
I was just about to suggest you go to the Bucks because they need a starting point guard. Uh, but that's the place that maybe Beal should think about if he gets waived from Phoenix,
Would you
if
take
he wants to
Beal
start.
in Denver?
Yeah, I'd take Beal too. Same reason. Like, yeah, he's still a decent
Just
player.
the contract right now
Just
that
yeah, he's
sucks.
on a super max. Like Bradley Beal makes, I think, more than Kevin Durant. Um, Let me double check that. Going to the Phoenix Suns. Not more than. He's like a million less than Kevin Durant right now. So one of the most expensive contracts in the league, just not worth that. But if he wanted to come for like a would I do a mid-level exception with him? Probably, because I think he's also a good off-ball offensive player as well. I just don't know if he like knows how to play winning basketball anymore. Uh, but yeah, like theoretically, yes. But he hasn't been waived, and Phoenix is actually not financially allowed to waive him because they already have other waived money on their books. That's the kind of situation that the Phoenix Suns have put themselves in. They're really funny because they're the hate agenda that keeps on giving to the point where it's like it's almost
You don't
not
need to
fun
hate
anymore.
anymore.
Yeah, I don't need to hate because
I
everybody else is already like
you can't
piling
even like
on.
enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah.
uh
Okay, so if no more questions, then we can start wrapping up the stream now.
yes.
Um, if you have made it to this point, we really appreciate you guys. And if you like our content, please remember to hit the like button and the subscribe button. So glad to finally get over 1,000 subs. Hit the notification bell and leave us a review. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon Music. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok. All our social links are in the description. And always remember, people, winning is fun and losing sucks, which is what we should tell Jonas so that he stays.
Come on, come win in Denver.
Win in Denver.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for getting us to 1,000 subs. Love you all. Talk to you soon.